across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is, in fact, my last show of the year, my last show of 2025 before I head off on my holes next week. So thank you very much indeed for joining me all this year. So appreciate your company. As you know, I always do. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense still. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, as again, thank you very much for being part of it. Lots to talk about today. If you miss anything of the show or miss anything from early in the week, do go to my YouTube page, Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about the government's strategy, finally long-awaited announced strategy on tackling violence against women and girls. All schoolboys are going to be taught how to respect women and girls to stem the rise, we're told, in misogyny and to reduce sexual violence. Schools will get guidance to help teachers and parents identify boys at high risk of being influenced by misogynists like the likes of Andrew Tate online and intervene to steer them away from abusive relationships. Is that going to work? Will it actually do anything? Is this yet again another sort of criticism along with all the others about how awful men and boys are? Girls always victims, men and boys always terrible human beings, the cause of all our ills. Because I'm not entirely sure that this strategy is going to do what the government says they're going to do, which is to halve violence against women and girls within a decade. I doubt it's going to do any of that. I doubt it's going to do a single thing other than tell, yet again, another generation of young men that they're worthless and bad people. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number for you to get in touch. You can text the word TALK and your message to 87222. You can also get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls, as you know, are charged at the national rate and text cost one standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking about that little student exchange scheme for all the Jacintas and the Sebastians of North London who are going to be able to go and study for a year in a European university. And of course, it means an load of students from the EU are going to come and study here. It's basically rejoining the Erasmus scheme that we were in under the EU. But guess what? It's not going to cost just a couple of £100 million. Not quite sure why it should cost a single penny to the taxpayer for us to have foreign students come to this country. I know, I'm old-fashioned like that. Apparently the total bill over a period of years is going to be £8 billion. Oh, we haven't got any money, you have to raise your taxes, but let's spend £8 billion basically funding foreign students to come and study at our top universities. Are these people having a laugh? I mean, this is actually a joke, because it does certainly feel like that. We're going to be talking about that, and also about how, let's face it, as we've been discussing all week, this is, who are we kidding? This is just the first step in the Prime Minister's drive for closer ties with Europe. He's going to take us back into the EU by the back door if it's the last thing he does. And it may well be the last thing he does. We're also going to be talking about 5 people getting arrested during a pro-Palestinian protest outside the Ministry of Justice. Both the Met and Greater Manchester Police yesterday said that anyone shouting slogans such as "Globalise the Intifada" would now face arrest. So will the Your Party MP Zara Sultana be next? She's been filmed alongside a group of pro-Palestinian protesters chanting about Intifada in a protest outside HMP Bronzefield in Surrey, where a Palestinian action activist is on hunger strike. And it hasn't worked out that eating food will help her stay well and healthy and indeed alive. But there we are. These people are not very bright. Anyway, all that coming up, plenty more besides, so much to talk about. I want to hear from you on all the big topics. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. First up, though, I want to hear from the man joining me in the studio. I say the man, he's actually come as a Christmas tree today. Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, and, as I say, Christmas tree. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, this is our last time together before Christmas, and,
so
and again my last. So
go
I
for it.
Well, you didn't realise I've been hiding on the 14th row in the canteen behind the reindeer all week. I was going
to say,
and nobody's noticed me.
Can I just say, my office does very big style Christmas decoration. I mean, my home looks like a Santa's grotto. I can't tell you. My husband, he sort of comes in, and I finish decoration. He goes, "Oh God, not again." If there is a space to put a twinkly light, I'll put a twinkly light on it. For those who are mistakenly listening on the radio, not watching us on YouTube or your connected device,
get a picture.
We'll put a picture out. But Philip is wearing. Where do you buy a jacket that is a Christmas tree?
Don't ask. You can get anything online.
Says the former senior military intelligence officer.
Luckily, I got paid for having to wear it rather than have to pay for it. Now,
I'm intrigued. You're going to have to explain that story now.
No. It's not. No, I find it cheap online and thought that is so disgusting. I have to get it.
Listen. I mean, where do you think I get all my clothes other than cheap and online? Hello. Right, Philip. Let's talk about misogyny. Let's talk about violence against women and girls. This is a long-awaited strategy. My God, because Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, never does anything quickly. We've had, I think, 3 strategies since 2010, so under the Tory government, coalition government as well, to tackle violence against women and girls, and 1 refresh, apparently, as well. Not entirely sure it's made any difference. Apparently, over 1 million incidents were reported in the last year. We've got full figures for 22, 23 of violence against women and girls. Bearing in mind, I think the vast majority are never actually reported to police. They say it's 20% of all police recorded crime. It must be pointed out, virtually all violent crime is committed by men and boys, young men largely. And interestingly, though, small point worth making, the vast majority of victims are men.
Yes.
Not women. That's a small point, I think, worth making. We're going to look at the stats. Men are far more at risk of violence from men than women are. However, violence against women largely often happens in domestic scenarios where women are clearly weaker physically, and sometimes in coercive relationships and the like, and unable to leave, they feel safely, and often they know safely. But I think tackling schoolboys, the idea about this is, we're told by teachers there's this rising rate of misogyny where these young lads are going online, they're seeing not only horrific pornography involving the most horrific, normalised now, utterly normalised violence against women, strangulation, slapping, spitting, you name it. Sex that, I'm sorry, would not be remotely normal or acceptable or fun for the average woman. Well documented, okay. They're also looking at the likes of Andrew Tate, but there are many more like him who are going, hey, look at me, I'm a really sad, bald, inadequate man from Luton who has somehow put on the muscle, become an MMA fighter or whatever he was, and made a load of money. I've got my Lamborghini, I've got all these women, I've got all the flash kit. Don't you want to be me? And telling men, nothing to be ashamed of, you're in charge, your woman is your bitch, and you can do what you want. Now, I've got no problem with him bigging himself up. I've got no problem with his Lamborghinis, with his message to men about, like, you can be all you can be. There's actually something in there. Of course, it has to be based on you are powerful at the expense of the women in your life who are there to be used and, yes, abused. He has not been convicted of any crimes yet involving abuse of women, but does anyone seriously think he has not raped, sexually assaulted, abused, and convinced women to be used as online, for online porn? No, of course we don't. Feel free to sue me, Andrew Tate. I'm pretty sure I'm bagged to rights on that one. But is that the problem? Is that what's going on? That the boys are seeing this stuff and then they are turning into young little tearaways who are a danger to, frankly, our daughters?
I think the government is oversimplifying it in many cases, and I think society has got a real case to answer here, because we've got Andrew Tate at one end of the spectrum, then very close to Andrew Tate at that end of the spectrum you've got everyone who's supporting all of these objectifying television programmes like Love Island and all the rest of it. You think, they're brilliant, but it's all about objectifying. It's all about power play between men and women.
But it objectifies the boys as well.
Oh, of course it objectifies the boys, but what it does is it creates a false narrative around what relationships are and everything else. And then you get right at the other end of the spectrum, you get where you get religious misogyny that comes in, where you get you Muslims who will believe that their wives or the female in their families have to wear the hijab or the burqa or something else, and insist that happens. And then how do you translate that into a course where you're going to get teachers from all communities, and some of them are going to be young teachers, 22, 23, 24, who won't have seen the extreme pornography, or hopefully haven't.
I don't know how you could miss it.
Who don't sit and watch Andrew Tate or anything else, but how do you then give them that life experience to then...
Well, I think the idea is they're going to have specialist classes, being taught, but again, I'm very worried about the people doing a lot of specialist classes in schools, because a lot of them, it's like the trans nonsense being pushed by organisations, funded by Stonewall and Mermaids and the like.
And a lot of people do that tend to be of a political persuasion and on a crusade.
They're not there to help. I mean, I remember going into my daughter's school a few years ago where they asked parents to come in and talk to us about what they want for their personal and sex education. published in the PSHE or whatever it's called this week, you know. And the two things I raised was stop telling kids they're born in the wrong body. They're not, full stop, end of, nothing to discuss. Don't affirm, you know, kids who think they're trans, no such thing as a trans kid. But also, crucially, I said, you know, are you telling girls, you know, that being strangled or hit during sex is not normal or acceptable? And they go, well, we don't, they actually said, and again, this was a sensible school, we don't like to use terms like normal. I'm like, well, no, you should.
Yes,
we absolutely need to use it.
Need to use it.
But here's the thing, the one thing I've learned over the years is that the women who are, I mean, you know, 2 women a week die from domestic abuse. That's the most extreme form, because we're definitely seeing, you know, look, we've seen other issues as well. But it does seem to me that, you know, virtually every single case I've ever covered as a news journalist has involved a woman who has repeatedly gone to the police, even gone to the courts, gone for help, desperately sought help, got a violent partner, and it's usually when she leaves that she's most at risk. People ask, why won't women leave? They don't leave because the point of leaving is your most perilous time. And they were known to the authorities, and nothing was done. So these men commit the same thing again and again and again. Now, I've got no issue. Look, if someone messed around with me like that, or with my child, I'll put this on record right now. It would be dealt with. If the authorities wouldn't do it would be dealt with. Put it that way. And I think a lot of parents would feel the same way. Woe betide, you know. You've messed with the wrong family would be my suggestion, mafia style at that point. But a lot of parents, and I've spoken to a lot of parents, no, there's no help. So shouldn't we be spending that time helping the people who we know already are at risk? And getting these men, and don't make the women move, get those men behind bars. They are a danger. If you threaten to kill someone repeatedly, you need to be in prison. But the other crucial thing is, you know, this government is happily, and Jess Phillips, the Safeguarding Minister, is classic among these, happily importing tens of thousands, both illegal and legal migrants from countries where misogyny is the norm, where violence against women and girls is completely norm, where women who get raped are then punished for having had sex outside marriage, sometimes forced to marry their rapist to protect the honour of their family. That's how sick some of these societies are. And they're importing them in, and they're saying to us, all cultures are equal and it's all fine. And if you talk about this problem, grooming gang scandal, or violence on our streets, or you know, migrant rapists living in asylum hotels, then you're a racist and a bad person. But that's the reality.
And at the same time, your schools aren't stopping kids coming in dressed up to the nth degree, not wearing school skirts but wearing belts, not doing their school uniforms up properly. You know, with
but they're also not stopping
lots of makeup.
The underskirting.
Correct, and not stop. And therefore, you know, I think the schools need to get back to basics, and children should be allowed to be children. And they should...
No phones in school. If your school allows the kids to have their phones, even with them in the classroom,
no
or even
phones, no makeup, no excessive jewellery. Uniform should be uniform.
We all survived it, didn't we?
Well, exactly, and it allows children to get away from that pressure coming younger and younger and younger and younger.
The sexualisation.
And then again, the media needs to wake up, and society needs to say, you know, a lot of these programmes that are all about objectifying people. It may be men and women say, oh, it's doing it equally. It's not. Kids are watching it, you know, beyond the threshold time. And it's helping formulate their
I have a few
brain.
times said to girls in the street, put some clothes back on.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously, you're in the street. You're in the streets for the love of God. Oh, well, you know, you're victim blaming then. No, I'm just saying, what message do you think you're sending out there? You're literally in a bra and pants on the street. You know, you're not at a beach bar. You know, you haven't just got sand on your feet.
And this is a wider society issue that needs to be dealt with. Don't just focus it on anti-misogynist courses.
But again, this whole idea that the boys are the problem. Again, the awful thing is the normalisation in terms of a lot of relationships, of abusive relationships, controlling relationships. There was a poll a few years ago where I think the average 15 or 16-year-old girl, well, something like 40% of them thought that, yes, if their boyfriend thought that they were flirting with another boy, it was absolutely acceptable for him to slap her. I mean, like,
what?
Yeah. This stuff is being normalised. Because they're seeing this in sort of, you know, sort of, let's face it, a lot of, the sort of lots of, pop culture, rap culture it's honestly.
And where are the parents in all of this? Why are the parents not reading? But then the trouble is the parents have grown up with all of this, and the parents are the ones that are sitting there watching the objectifying programmes on telly who are saying, oh no, get your make here.
I think a lot of mums are part of the problem. They're putting their girls in clothes which is just utterly inappropriate for the age range. I am that person in department stores saying, I want to see the manager. Why is this on sale for an 8-year-old?
Yes.
I am that parent. I'm afraid I am. I'm a busybody, but genuinely, I think well, the parents buy it. Well, they shouldn't be allowed to.
Correct.
End of. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this, because I do think the demonisation of boys. I think boys have been turning to the likes of Andrew Tate and then being drilled with this horrible. It is misogyny, this hatred of women and this women as objects and beneath men to be used. They're being drilled with that because they're seeking out something, because they're being told right now, you grow up now as a young man, and I say that someone's got a daughter, and all of my friends who've got daughters and sons, we always talk about, actually, we're more worried about the boys than the girls. The girls are being told, you can have it all, you can have everything. Now, that's a bit of a lie as well, but they're being empowered. They're being told, you're the greatest, you're wonderful. Frankly, too much. And the boys are being told, you're nothing, you're rubbish, you're no use to anybody. You're a bad person. You're just, all you are is a walking rapist. You've got no worth. You're not as good. You're inadequate. You're someone to mock. I tell you what, though, you know what? When you look at the who it was who tackled that gunman at Bondi Beach, Who was it? Who was it? It was a man in the Heaton Park synagogue. Who was it who blocked the doors, to keep everyone else safe? It was 2 men who ended up being shot. That's why. This is the thing. When you actually look at, when we want someone to come and protect us on the streets, it's nearly always a man. When the people are going to have to go to war, it's going to be a man. The people who are dying at work, more likely to die at work because they do all the dangerous jobs, it's men. I'm really sorry, but we need to stop demonising men and boys and telling them they're worthless pieces of nothing on the bottom of our shoe, and then they wouldn't have to turn to people like someone who is genuinely a worthless piece of nothing under my shoe, like Andrew Tate. And
one of the biggest killers of men in their 20s is suicide as well, and a lot of that is the pressure that's been put on them, and people feel inadequate and not up to it, and everything else. So society's to blame for that. We've got a whole society issue here that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's turn to another topic, because I want to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000, whether you're a man or a woman. But also let's talk about this government's plan to rejoin the student exchange scheme, the Erasmus scheme, which is just for the Jacinders of North London. I mean, I know loads of people whose parents go, oh, how wonderful, this is great, this is wonderful. We're going to be able to go and send our kids on this year abroad. Thing is, the fees in the EU, most of those universities have fees of like about a couple £100 a year, not £9,500 a year like we're paying. So when students from the EU are coming over here, and by the way, way more of them will come here than will go to Europe, because barely anyone does foreign languages in this country, can speak another language to that level. They could do a study for a year abroad, whereas pretty much everybody who's going to be at university in Europe will speak pretty good to not fluent English. It's the second language of the world. More of them, as happened before we left the EU, and certainly more now with youth unemployment sky high, are going to be coming here. And we're going to be paying for the privilege. And apparently that cost isn't going to be a couple of $100 million, which is too much anyway. Could be up to $8 billion over a few years. That's insane.
It's completely insane. And we look at the statistics, and they're very telling. 2020, Erasmus, we sent 9,900 students out into the EU. We had 16,100 in, so about 35,000. The Tories replaced it with a touring scheme, which wasn't just EU-based, it was globally based. And about 35,000 people going out. In 2021, there was £100 million allocated to it. 23, 24, 110 million, and the last year it was held 78 million. We're now talking 8 billion for just 35,000. It's back to 35,000. Where is this coming from?
But the benefit goes to the students from the EU more. But again, they're saying it's open to everybody. It's like, we're saying yes, all these kids on council estates.
At the same time, we're ripping our farmers off for 250 million. And saying we can't afford them because of everything else.
And you know why they're doing it? They're doing it because since 2016, from the day after that referendum in June 2016, Keir Starmer's main aim in life was making sure to stop us leaving the EU in the first place. That he wanted a second. He was the one who was the architect of that second referendum plan in 2019. Thank God they weren't elected. Jeremy Corbyn would have been Prime Minister. Imagine that. Although actually him a Eurosceptic, but didn't actually do anything to try and push that case. And and they failed at that, and they've said all the right things at the last election, didn't they? Oh, no, we wouldn't rejoin the EU, we wouldn't, we wouldn't join the customs union, single market. Wink, wink. They're going to take us in by the back door, aren't they? We're going to join every little thing. We're going to be paying a fortune for every little thing with no say, but we're going to be, got no power over anything, but we're going to be at the table. And then they're going to say, at this point, we may as well be back in.
Yeah. Well, they've also said they'll do no U-turns, and they'll clean up politics, and
they wouldn't raise taxes.
Wouldn't raise taxes. So we can't trust a single thing that the government said before it came in, because it was quite clear now. And if anyone doesn't realise this, they said anything that they thought someone wanted to hear, so that they'd get their vote.
Yeah.
Now that they've got their vote, they haven't got a plan, so they're making everything up, and that's why they're doing so many U-turns. Because when they make something up, they suddenly realise, oh, that doesn't work, let's reverse it again.
But also, they have no respect for a democratic vote, Brexit vote, the biggest democratic vote for anything in British history. And they think, again, they still think, we're all a bit stupid. Well, we're all a bit thick and racist, aren't we? And we didn't know what we were voting for. I knew exactly what I was voting for, Frank, and I'm pretty sure I got a better degree than you, Keir Starmer.
But they think that everyone who's voted for Labour is completely stupid and will automatically believe anything they say without questioning it. And I think they're
total disdain. That's it. I think the Tories have had quite a lot of disdain for British voters. I mean, again, they promised lots of things as a result of Brexit, delivered not just not delivering them, but delivering the opposite of them.
And they cocked up, and that could be measured.
But this, yes, exactly. But this is the thing. It is so deceitful. If they think that there's no way we're going back into the EU proper without actually a referendum. Once people know what the deal is to go back in, once there's a proper campaign, and by the way, the EU will charge us a fortune. There'll be no discount like Margaret Thatcher managed to get that rebate. Sorry, there's no way in the world the British people will ever vote to get back in. I see poll after poll after poll saying, oh, people regret voting for Brexit. Genuinely, I mean this absolutely seriously. I have never met a single person who voted for Brexit who regrets their vote. Every single thing that has happened from June 2016 onwards has absolutely convinced me and every Brexiteer I know that it was the right thing to have done.
And the information campaign that's trying to say everything is better in the EU is not being countered by the very fact that the cost of living in the UK, when it comes to the cost of shopping, when it comes to the cost of fuel, when it comes to the cost of everything else, is an awful lot less than in the EU across the board in different EU countries.
No, food's much more expensive here.
No, it's not. You get right. Here's a perfect example. You get a little salad box thing in the Republic of Ireland. It costs you €10. Over here, it costs you £3.50.
Oh, OK. I don't know where you're getting it, £3.50 here, but there we are. Let's also talk one final topic before we get to our calls. Police are finally arresting protesters who chant "Globalise the Intifada." We had an extraordinary statement from the... God, it was convoluted. I was trying to read it, while with the break, going, what has Met Police, the Great Manchester Police chiefs, actually say? It was like, oh, here it is. Basically, the nuance of what does "Globalise the Intifada" mean? The protests go, oh, it just means, it's the struggle, just worldwide struggle for Palestinians. No, it doesn't. Globalised Intifada means the Intifada is very clearly, very, very, very clearly the mass slaughter of Jews. Yeah. Globalising it means do it around the world. So that's what we've had on Bondi Beach. This is what it means. And it is interesting, finally we've seen some people actually arrested for calling for Intifada.
I think police chiefs should resign over this very fact. We have been saying, and I have been saying the whole way through, the people that are chanting this are going to stimulate terrorist activity in this country or other parts of the world, but because they're normalising a call to arms for people. And now the police are suddenly saying, oh, well, because of what happened in Australia, the horse is bolted, let's close that stable door. Well, I'm sorry, they've got intelligence professionals that are advising them that will have been saying the same as me.
I mean, the thing is, a lot of the people on those protests, let's be honest,
don't know what they're talking about.
Well, they don't. They don't know where. Well, again, it's interesting. If you put Palestine into Google Maps, it takes you straight to basically Israel, Gaza, and West Bank. It's like the whole area. It's like, I mean, hello, that's not Palestine, mate. Doesn't actually exist. By the way, doesn't actually exist. So Google, sort yourselves out. But I mean, I think a lot of those people on those marches, they couldn't place Israel on a map.
No, they couldn't.
They don't know where Gaza is. They know nothing of the West Bank. They know absolutely nothing. I can tell from the people who are messaging me constantly. They are literally the most ignorant. I don't mean like we differ on our views on things. They actually state things that are provably categorically untrue. Yeah. They know nothing. They're just reading a load of nonsense online. And the thing is, so do they know what globalised intifada means? No, but I'm wearing my keffiyeh, so I'm thinking I'm big I am, and I'm virtue signalling, and I'm being cool with the latest big woke cause. But the people who are behind these marches and the people who organise these things, they absolutely know what they're doing.
Of course.
And we know they know what they're doing because a lot of them have got links with Hamas.
Yes, and they're being manipulated, not just through Hamas, but through the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, the Quds Force, and all the rest of it. So it's been and then there's links to the Russians and all the rest of it. It's very difficult. But then people start quoting history, and they try and suggest that Palestine is historically belongs to the Palestinians, and then you point out that the Muslim faith only came thousands of years after the Jewish faith, and it was the land of Judea long beforehand. They go, oh, but that bit of history doesn't count.
I visited Jerusalem earlier this year. I mean, you only have to go visit Jerusalem. It's like, seriously, how bizarrely did this particular building, which was a space of worship for Jews, how come this is underneath the place? I mean,
they just haven't got a clue.
It's basic historical knowledge.
But reality doesn't count whenever you've got something fixed in your brain, and you will not.
Plus, they're just idiots. I mean, they're not only useful idiots for Islamofascism, they're literally just idiots. I was delighted to see that young chap at Oxford University who had said, who put the Zionists in the ground. He means me as well. I'm a Zionist. I believe in the state of Israel's right to existence. So he wanted to put me and a lot of our audience and many people in this country in the ground. And he has actually been arrested. He's entitled to a fair trial, of course, absolutely. Yep. But interesting to see that. People are.
He's been arrested now.
Well, there is something. She said the wheels are in motion. There are consequences. Well, words have consequences. So we keep being told by the woke. Yeah. Anyway, it's coming up to 10:28. Let's take a quick break. I'm going to take your calls. Lots more coming up. We're going to talk to the brilliant barrister, legal director of UK Lawyers for Israel, Natasha Hausdorff, about the globalised intifada and why the BBC seemed terribly confused about it as well. That's all coming up. This is Talk.
This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning, all around the clock, to late at night, to the point where, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:31 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Lots getting in touch about this new strategy to tackle violence against women and girls, which basically is going to be teaching schoolboys how to respect women and girls and to not be misogynistic. Will it work? Let's talk to Andy. He's in Hampshire. Good morning to you, Andy.
Good morning, Julie. Merry Christmas
Merry
to all
Christmas to you.
Yes, misogyny is disgusting, but also misandry is also disgusting.
And that's hatred of men, yeah.
Exactly. Men have been victims of domestic violence. You only have to look at the Office of National Statistics to see how much violence was against men in the last year or so. I think this strategy is a good idea to teach young boys about misogyny, but equally it should be a two-way street, because there are toxic females out there as well that are on Instagram, YouTube, etc., saying exactly in an Andrew Tate fashion about men.
Yeah, and there's also, you know, in comedy, it's totally acceptable for a woman, you know, guys had an affair and the woman slaps him, and that's like, absolutely, you go, girl. If a woman had an affair and a man slapped her, this is outrageous, call the police. I mean, come on, it's got to be equal, hasn't it?
Yeah, you've got to have a two-way street. You can't have these people that came on earlier that are saying that, we're going to teach misogyny in school. They've got to teach about toxic femininity as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think both sides, but also again, young women need to be taught to not basically be drawn to those kinds of men, because my God, an awful lot of them are, very worryingly. Andy, really appreciate your call. Thank you very much for that, and a very lovely Christmas to you and your family. Nick is on the line in Northampton. Hi, Nick.
Hi. First time talking to you.
Thank you for calling. Oh, you've been two-timing me with others, have you?
Yes. Well, I've tried to get in through because, believe it or not, I have the same surname as Claire.
Oh, there you are then. There you are. Right, tell me, Mr. Pearsall, what do you want to say?
Right, about this misogyny.
Yeah.
I taught my nephews from the age of 5, 6, any male who hits a female can never be called a man.
Yeah.
They are now late 30s, early 40s, and they have taught their kids the same.
Exactly.
And it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
It's simple. A man can do... I've been hit with a baseball bat by a woman.
Wow.
I had to turn round and ask a friend, a female friend, to hit her because I couldn't.
OK, we're into some very dodgy territory here. Everyone needs to stop hitting everybody. But you felt that whatever the horrific circumstances of this was, I'm interested in the friend actually going, yeah, I'll do that. But yeah, it's just about being a man. Real men don't hit women. Real men don't rape women. I mean, it's as simple as that, isn't it?
Yes.
But you have to model it. Boys need to see strong role models in the men that are around them that show them how to behave.
Yes, and it's not going to be taught in schools because all they're going to do is use their ideologies to shape what they want.
Yeah, and again, my worry is, not enough men, not enough strong male role models in school, and a lot of boys, primary school, they barely come across a male teacher. They're not seeing, a lot of them growing up without dads, they're not seeing what a real man is. Nick, thank you for that, Nick. Just no hitting anybody. 10:35 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break, then we're going to talk to political editor of the New World, James Ball, about, whether the Prime Minister is just trying to take us back into the EU by the back door. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk at the Home of Common Sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now to James Ball. He's political editor of The New World and joins us today. Good morning to you, James.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. One among the conversations we're having today is about this government plan to rejoin the Erasmus Student Exchange Scheme. Basically, loads of students from Britain can go and study in the EU for a year as part of their university course or other learning they're doing, and same from the EU. There's no doubt at all, as what's happened before and will happen in the future, more students from the EU, there's more of them speak English as their second language, able to come here than our students go to the EU. Is this just a nice little scheme for little posh kids from middle-class homes in North London to get a nice gap year in Florence? Or is this about, frankly, something a bit more dodgy, which is the Prime Minister, a massive Ramona, not even a Remainer, trying to take us back into the EU by the back door?
I think, honestly, it's nearer the former than the latter. There's the odd working class kid that slips through and gets a nice year away, but it's a bit of a middle class perk. But Erasmus is quite popular. People like it. People think it's fair enough. Who
are the people who like it? Everyone who works at the New World magazine.
It polls really well. Something like 2/3 of people want it in. It is ludicrous.
2/3 of people haven't got a clue what it is. They've never heard of it.
Well, this is the problem with polling on any issue. You ask people a question, it's the first time they think about it. But if we look at the numbers, it's good. It is not anywhere near coming back in the EU. It was offered to us on basically identical terms in the Brexit deal. So it wasn't sort of part of a stealth thing. Europe's always been happy for us to be in it, as you say.
Of course they are. Their kids get to come here. They get to come here. By the way, the EU, could you tell me any of the top universities in the world that are in the EU? Oh, none since we left. We've got 5.
Yeah, we're really good at universities. We should maybe stop kicking them around as often as we do. Successive governments.
Maybe they should bother teaching kids in real life, not in Zoom, and stop charging $9.5 for nothing.
Hey, we can either say that they're among the best in the world or...
No, they are ranked among the best in the world. But the EU doesn't have a single one ranked among the best in the world, which tells you who's benefiting the most. It's going to be the EU. But I think we've already got a scheme similar to the Erasmus scheme, but it's much better than the Erasmus scheme, because instead of just letting students go and study in Europe, they can study across the whole world under the Turing scheme.
It's about the level of admin and about the number of unis that can go in. There's no reason we can't keep on the Turing scheme, but Erasmus works. It's widely adopted. It's in there. A lot of people who've done it like it. And let's be honest, it's not that big a deal.
But apart from the fact that it may end up
number of European students come in.
It's going to cost £8 billion over a few years. We haven't got a spare £8 billion last time I looked. I mean, I'm just saying, if we do have a spare £8 billion over a few years, I'm thinking there are better things to spend that money on than Jacinda and Tarquin going off to Paris for a gap year.
I think we have to stress it's a very, very interesting set of costings that I don't think most people would look at on this one. It is a relatively small scheme. It is not EU by the back door. It is largely just to let people have a sort of gap year, but in universities. Yes, we took slightly more Europeans than otherwise, but then again, we do know that foreign students spend a fortune while they're over here. It tends to be pretty good for the economy.
Well, actually, an awful lot of foreign students, the ones not from the EU largely, also tend to stay a long time. And a huge number actually end up overstaying their visas, staying here, claiming asylum and the like. So actually, students also need somewhere to live, and they often want the cheap accommodation, for which they are competing with families who are homegrown here for exactly the same accommodation and putting those rents up.
Well, these days they tend to go for the ludicrously lavish student flats that pop up everywhere, and I would kind of rather we were building more normal flats than student flats. But when you look, these sort of student-only living places, the sort of competition has gone down somewhat, but it does have knock-on effects. I'm not going to lie.
Well, exactly, of course it does.
Erasmus is not a big source of overstays. People actually need to go back and finish their degrees. They're generally from fairly rich European countries. There are issues with some courses. There are issues with particular countries and students. I'm not going to pretend there aren't. Erasmus has never really been the source of this.
Okay.
This is not going to turn into one of...
But nevertheless,
it's a good bit of politics.
Ordinary British taxpayers are basically helping to fund a nice gap year for some posho students from the EU and some posho students from the UK. I'm not sure that's a good use of British taxpayers' money.
Hey, I'm hoping we can get some less posho kids on it. If it's a bit better known, this is not actually more expensive.
How many kids do you think who go to bog standard comps in this country from ordinary working class homes are doing a language A level, so you can give them even vaguely the English discourse? Only 3% of all A levels taken last year were actually in a foreign language. The idea that people, and then even fewer of them go and do foreign languages as a degree. The idea that these people who've done, got a C grade in GCSE French can go and do a gap year in Switzerland is a load of nonsense.
I quite agree, but if we want people to do more languages, I mean, state schools offer them. There's some really good language teachers in state schools. It's that pupils don't want it. It's the chance to be able to actually afford to go abroad for a year, and that's a realistic prospect for you, is there? I might look to do the language at A level. As it is, yeah. I barely speak English.
Let's also talk about another language-related story. What does globalise the intifada mean? Because all of a sudden, out of the blue, after the slaughter of innocent people on a beach at Bondi Beach in Sydney, the Metropolitan Police and the Greater Manchester Police have suddenly decided that the phrase globalise the intifada is actually a troublesome and worrying thing for people to say, and it does have real-world consequences, they say, and that means slaughter, not just at Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester, but also attacks on Jews in London and across the country, and indeed the murder of Jews on the beach at Bondi Beach. Police have now said they will arrest protesters who chant globalise the intifada. We've seen some arrests last night. Do you agree with that?
I think it's a tricky issue. I think they should not use the slogan. Same as from the river to the sea. I think it's a pretty appalling slogan.
What does it mean?
So I think a lot of clueless students and a lot of clueless sort of well-meaning activists use it meaning the whole world should support Gaza, the whole world should do that. I think when Hamas or Hamas's allies use it, they are saying attack and persecute Jews everywhere.
Well, kill Jews. It means killing Jews.
I think to those people, absolutely it does. And I think that's why no one should use it. I think in the same way, from the river to the sea, some people claim they use it to mean a peaceful two-state solution, whatever, or a one-state solution that doesn't kill Jews. It's very obviously not what Hamas mean when they use it, so they shouldn't use it. I think...
Should people be arrested for using those phrases?
I think that's where you get to a tricky position. I think we start to... I think there's some cases where you obviously shouldn't use it. I think there are positions...
When you say someone shouldn't use it, this is a matter of politeness. So if we say, would it be awful? Would it be all right if you didn't stand outside, say, a synagogue where people are worshipping and shout, globalise the intifada from the river to the sea, because that is heard by Jewish people, indeed, I'm not Jewish, but heard by me as basically destroy Israel and kill Jews around the world. And that, for some reason, might bother some people, particularly of the Jewish faith. So are you saying that we just politely ask them and then we just hope they agree? Or are you saying they shouldn't say it, in which case you're not allowed to say it because it's actually inciting hatred and violence, and therefore you should be arrested? Yes or no?
I think context matters. I mean, generally, I would say I'm against censorship, but I'm a big fan of self-censorship. I think
They're not going to self-censor.
People should stop using it.
Okay, they should stop using it, but they don't. So do they get arrested at that point?
I think for police, it becomes a context of, can you demonstrate it's being used as a threat? I think you can say if it's being used near a synagogue. I think if it's being shouted at a Jewish person. I think if people have had warnings or been asked not to use it and persisted in using it, then you might have a case for saying it raises to incitement, it raises to menacing behaviour. But I want to keep that bar there that's about incitement of violence. I think that's quite significant when we're arresting people for speech.
OK, very interesting. OK.
And I think that holds.
All right, James, really interesting to talk to you about that. We've got a next guest to talk about that as well. Political editor of the New World, James Ball, thank you for that. Philip Ingram's listening to all of that. He's a former senior military intelligence officer. If you're watching on the telly, you've just tuned in. He is dressed as a Christmas tree. I can't help with that. We've got to put a picture out there. I mean, we're joking, but do you think people should be arrested for saying globalise the intifada?
Yes, I take it as an incitement for violence against Jews.
Because that's what the words mean.
That's what the words mean. And if people are naive enough, the fact that they'll chant it is going to be used by others to incite violence and to take violent action against the Jews. So they're all part of it, and they need to wake up. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. And the only other point I want to get back on is talking about student loans and bits and pieces. As at 23-24, the student loan company has said it still owed £5.5 billion pounds by EU students that have been through here, and that is not going to be recovered. This is a huge cost to the taxpayer.
And this is the weird thing. So you come here as an EU student, you're able to get to get the student loans same as British students are. This blows my mind still. And they get access. Well, they certainly. I mean, that's money they were allowed. Maybe they're not allowed anymore, but these students are going to be allowed to get the student loans, and largely they don't pay them back. And even if they do earn enough to pay it back, they can't be tracked down.
And the student loan company is not a private bank that's out there with big private money. It's taxpayers' money.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean, I don't think there should be tuition fees at all, but I'm old-fashioned. But I would also halve the number of people going to university. But you know, there's different ways of dealing with these things. 10:47 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to talk more about where we are with people being arrested, finally, for chanting "Globalise the Intifada." I'm going to talk to Natasha Hausdorff. She's a legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. This is Talk.
This journey, I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. You know, his WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK. This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning, all around the clock, to late at night, to the point where, you know, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything,
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:51 is the time. Let's talk more about whether globalising the Intifada is in fact a perfectly lovely thing for very right-on woke people to do to signal their virtue about caring about Gaza and the plight of babies being slaughtered apparently on a second-by-second basis by the evil Israelis, or whether it is actually basically a call to slaughter Jews worldwide. Well, let's talk to someone who may well know more about this than most of us, certainly more than the Metropolitan Police Chief and the Greater Manchester Police Chief, who yesterday yesterday finally woke up to what that phrase really means in the wake of the Bondi Beach massacre. Natasha Hausdorff is a barrister. She's also legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. Very good morning to you, Natasha.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you once again for joining us. Can we just go back very quickly to just where did the phrase globalise the Intifada come from? We know what globalise means. It means like take it worldwide. What does the word Intifada actually mean?
Well, I appreciate your attempts at lightness in the introduction, but that is really in juxtaposition to the real meaning of this term. It was used in the 1987 violent attacks on Israelis by Palestinians, and then again from the year 2000, periods of several years in which hundreds, if not thousands, of Israelis were targeted, certainly hundreds killed, thousands injured, including through suicide bombings, shooting attacks, car rammings, and other explosions.
The sort of bombing of school buses and cafes and
discotheques, markets, targeting civilians, targeting Jews, let's be clear, for slaughter. And what we saw on the Bondi Beach attacks, as on the 7th of October, was that very similar Jew hunt. That is at the essence of this phrase of Intifada, killing Jews because they are Jews. There is a genocidal intent that certainly underpins that also. And the fact that it has taken so long, over 2 years, for law enforcement to wake up to the realities of that term is truly inexcusable. It has bred an environment in which that sort of incitement and brainwashing of people has been enabled.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. This is the thing. The BBC, I mean, again, who've been obviously, so good at explaining this conflict for so long, they have faced more allegations of bias after they've described the original, Intifada, the Palestinian uprisings, in which, as you say, thousands of people died. By the way, on both sides, as largely unarmed and popular. This is a report on the BBC website. We're told this bastion of unbiased, trustworthy news that we all are forced to pay for, explaining the origin of the word Intifada, made no mention of the fact that 1,000 Israelis, almost entirely civilians, and about 5,000 Palestinians died in those clashes and terror attacks between 1987 and 2005. And only once there were complaints, they changed the report, saying the word Intifada was regarded by some as a call for violence against Jewish people. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary to ignore that uprising. It wasn't a poster campaign or a letter writing campaign. It was a bombing school buses and cafes campaign.
Yes, I think the term uprising is a problematic translation because it suggests indeed that this narrative of resisting oppression is accurate. It is not. This is ultimately this wave of terror, which so many people have, of course, been warning is coming for the West after Israel, and we're now seeing that. But it is shameful that the BBC, upon being forced to amend their entirely false account, suggesting that this was an unarmed uprising,
that is largely peaceful Black Lives Matter protests,
Well, indeed, largely peaceful, popular. But the fact that they've amended that to a sort of both sides reporting on, some people consider it to be this and others consider it to be a peaceful uprising, is also inexcusable. And it feeds into the very problematic narrative and through that, of course, to the woefully inadequate policing of this issue. I mean, I remember I was on a panel with Lord Ken MacDonald, former DPP, and Jonathan, the former, forgive me, Jonathan, the former. No, reviewer, independent reviewer of legislation, Jonathan Hall, in November 2023, Julia, where we were discussing the inadequate approach of the police to these hate marches. Had that been nipped in the bud, 2 months after the 7th of October, then the situation may very well be.
And again, you can march. I was defending the right of people to march. I feel very strongly in freedom of speech, freedom of protest, the right of people to march on our streets and to say, this is a cause I feel strongly about, and to, the cause of the Palestinian state. I disagree with their cause, but they have every right to march. However, you don't have a right to, and as we saw again and again and again, there were quite, absolutely blatant, flags and T-shirts and signs where they were basically glorifying the terror attack and the October the 7th, they were glorifying the terrorists, glorifying Hamas and hateful and, dangerous, violent, ideologies. And that's not legal. That shouldn't be legal. And we're constantly told that these are peaceful marches, but they're only peaceful because the police pretend they're peaceful, because if anyone challenges them, particularly if someone's Jewish or looks, as one police officer said, openly Jewish, like Gideon Falter was told off for being openly Jewish, then they're basically shooed away, put in a pen, to all intents and purposes fenced off from these people and not allowed to challenge some of the violent rhetoric that they are spouting.
And I think emphasis on that violent rhetoric is important. The context has been mentioned, of course, by the police commissioners recently, including Mark Rowley. And it does seem that there is now this move to a different approach after the Yom Kippur attack in Manchester, after the Bondi attacks over the weekend, on the basis of this supposed change in context, which is also remarkable when one considers the context in which these marches began, which was, of course, the genocidal attacks of the 7th of October.
Because the first march was organised while women were still being raped, children were still being burnt alive in their homes in the kibbutz. That was the first march was organised on October the 7th itself.
So the context has been clear for over 2 years, and the fact that it has taken so long for any action to arise here is, as I say, inexcusable. I think it's also important in that context to recognise that the excuses we have been hearing, that the police simply don't have the powers to properly address this, are plainly incorrect, because they have now indicated a change of policy on precisely the same legislation that has been in existence throughout this period. There are some serious questions that require answering because people have been murdered as a result of this continued incitement.
But why do we have to wait for men, women and children to be slaughtered, whether it's at a synagogue here or on a beach in Sydney, for them to take the action which so many people have been pleading with them to do?
And the experts in the field, it's now apparent that after the Manchester attack on the synagogue on Yom Kippur, that Lord Ken MacDonald has in fact been instructed to review the legislation, but again, only after lives were taken, when he was a gentleman that was calling some 2 years ago for serious questions to be answered about the police's approach.
Yeah, it is really soul-destroying. I think hopefully it's a good start. I fear, like you, I think the genie's out of the bottle on this one, and that this has been going on too long, and they're not. When the next big march, they are not going to be arresting everyone saying this, and there's going to be a show of strength from the pro-Palestinian mob, because this is what they are, and then we'll perhaps see their true colours. But I think I know where the British people stand on this one. Natasha Housdorf, always good to talk to you, barrister and legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. Get Philip Ingram's thoughts on all of that, and yours as well. Particularly want to hear from you about this teaching of anti-misogyny classes. Give us a call to have your say. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, you're connected to us. Thank you so much for your company. This is actually my last show of 2025. I can't believe it. Last show of the year. Peter Cardwell's in tomorrow. But it's been absolutely fabulous having your company all year. I hope you'll stay with us for the next couple of hours as well. By the way, Kev is stepping in for Ian Collins, who's off today as well. So having a little bit of a change around today. So you're getting everybody today. But lots more to talk about. And coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about that Erasmus scheme, the student exchange scheme. It's apparently going to cost us £8 billion. So a load of posh kids from Europe can come here to study, and a load of posh kids from here can go to Europe to study. But really, is that a good use of our taxpayers' money? Also, we're going to talk a lot more about this strategy to tackle violence against women and girls. And the long-awaited strategy has finally been published. The Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, has been out on the airways telling us how this is going to halve violence against women and girls in the next decade. It won't. I think we all know that. One of the things they're going to be doing is having all schoolboys being taught how to respect women and girls to stem this rise of misogyny and to reduce that violence that we're seeing from boys against girls. And they're going to get guidance at school over how to identify boys who are at high risk from being influenced by people like Andrew Tate online and intervene to steer them away. But is that the right answer? Maybe we just need to get some more men into school, so boys have got role models of how to be a real man, and real men don't sexually assault or are violent to women, do they? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Also going to be talking more about the Globalise the Intifada arrests during a pro-Palestinian march outside the Ministry of Justice, and why migrants that are brought to Britain to live with their partners, so Brits who are here, who are allowed to bring their partners here to be with them, is costing the economy a staggering £5.6 billion. It turns out those husbands and wives don't actually earn very much or contribute very much, and a lot of them are on benefits. But should we still allow them to come? I mean, I would say you've got a right to fall in love with anyone around the world, aren't you, if you're a British citizen, and bring them here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000, as I say, is a number to call on all the big topics. I'm delighted to say joining me in the studio is a Christmas tree dressed as Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. I was saying earlier in the show, if you're listening and you're not watching us on YouTube, you're missing the jacket of the decade. I don't know where you find a jacket which is basically a decorated Christmas tree, but Philip has found one. Morning to you again.
Good morning again. Yes, yeah, it's amazing we can find on the interweb, the World Wide Web.
I mean, I hope that was on the dark web, because that should absolutely be something the police should investigate.
The bright and sparkly web.
I made him take his tie off before we went on air on the basis that I didn't think the tie suited the outfit. I wasn't sure about it. Let's come back to this violence against women and girls, this strategy to stop it rather than promote it. There's no doubt there is an issue. Of course there is an issue of violence against women and girls. Whether it's growing is I think an interesting debate or not, because I think we talk about it a lot more. I think if you talk to an awful lot of older women like myself, we will say that things have massively changed in terms of attitudes to women from men, women's expectations. You know, how you were treated in the office, not having your bum pinched, or being wolf whistled in the street, and the comedy and the TV that absolutely blatantly normalised sexist treatment of women. Rape was legal in marriage in my lifetime, for goodness sake. A man could not be convicted of having sex with his wife without her consent. That's by the way, quite a few countries where that's still not a crime. But it seems to me we do have a problem with what is being taught online, what kids are seeing in terms of violent, horrible pornography, the normalisation of very violent sex, and the violence is all directed at the women, slapping, strangulation, spitting, you name it. and the Andrew Tates, the influencers who are saying, yeah, you know, she's a commodity to be used, you're in charge, you can slap her if you want to, glorifying male violence as male power. And of course we all know that a man who hits a woman is actually a pathetic creature. But all good men already know that. Do you think that schools teaching boys and girls about this is going to help at all?
It's very difficult.
You say that as a man whose job has probably involved violence at times as a military man.
But you know, violence against women and domestic violence and everything else is completely different. And in the military, it's controlled violence in a situation where it's the only answer that there is. And actually 90% of the time, in fact 99% of the time, you actually resort to non-violent means of dealing with a threat.
But you understand violence in a way that perhaps most of us don't.
Yeah. And you know, I think the government's going for another soundbite by talking about teaching children in school, and I don't know how they're going to get it right, because there's so many traps that are there where they could get this very wrong. And in schools, you tend to get people who have got an axe to grind about something.
They've got a political ideology. Even if they bring in outside groups, they're going to have a particular ideology.
Exactly, and that could backfire the other way. I think this is a whole of society issue that needs to be dealt with, and this could be one of the components of dealing with from a whole of society. But if you're not dealing with all the rest of it, then this in isolation is not going to make a difference.
But I mean, I would say, and again, when I interviewed her, Bonnie Blue, you know, having sex with 1,000 men in a day, and the language she used, like about her body, like destroy me, hurt me, do what you want, allowing the men to, I mean, manhandle. I mean, I found the whole thing so physically repulsive when I watched, because for research purposes, the documentary about it. Just, I mean, I actually felt physically sick, especially as a mother of a daughter. Her attitude to her, but I wanted nothing. I just wanted to cuddle her, I wanted to hug her, and like, you know, I genuinely feel sorry.
She needs treatment.
I don't care how much money she's making. I genuinely feel sorry for her, and as I told her at the time. But an awful lot of young women do view their bodies as a commodity to be sold effectively, whether it's on OnlyFans, these awful Instagram things where they're sort of showing their bum and their boobs at the same time and pouting and making their bodies look like cartoon characters of women. You know, the silly false eyelashes, the silly pumped up lips. It's all very fake and weird, and it's all part of an attitude that your bodies are commodities and you're only there to be used and to please men, and that men can then do what they want. Poll after poll has shown young women have just as many disturbing views as young men about violence towards young women, the normalisation of abusive, controlling relationships, but women being drawn to these men because it means they love you. Yeah, damaged women are drawn to damaged men, but they're just damaged in different ways, and they show it different ways. But it seems to me one of the biggest problems we've got is, you know, boys are not seeing enough real men. They're not having strong. A lot of them don't have dads at home or absent dads. You know, they're at work and things, they're doing the best they can, but they're not the strong role model. Every film they see, every advert they see, they've either got men who are like very violent and aggressive, or they're complete weak saplings who can't manage to change a kid's nappy and therefore they're idiots. And the mockery of men in TV and in adverts, I think, is a real issue. They're not seeing men at primary school. You're lucky to see a man in a primary school as a teacher now. Even at secondary school, not as many men. And again, those teachers have had their authority stripped away from them. I just worry that a lot of young men are not seeing enough strong male role models in their lives, personal or at school or on TV, so they know what a real man is and how real men behave. And they think that a real man is someone like Andrew Tate, who says, yeah, it's okay to hit a woman and use her for sex and brutalise her, and that makes you the big I am. They don't realise that actually men like that are pathetic, weak, useless idiots.
Yeah, and this is reinforced by what we get in the media. You know, as I said before, you look at the likes of Love Island and all the rest of it, which is objectifying men and women. You know, the objectification of the men is you have to be built in a certain way, you're budgie smuggling in a certain way, dealing with the women in a certain way, and you're jumping between the relationships as they're having this competition between all the different women. And you look at the number of programmes that are out there doing that. You're Married at First Sight and everything else.
Married at First Sight isn't like, I'm a big fan of Married at First Sight.
But but it's doing nothing but objectify people, and that is one step on the path to what Andrew Tate is then exploiting, because you're not getting
just
those
a body.
You're not getting those role models at home. You're not getting those role models in school. You're not getting those role models in society because there's no respect for the police or anyone in authority. So the TV is giving you this different view as to what men and women are, and then Andrew Tate is filling in the vacuum and saying, and if you take one step to my level, you can earn shed loads of money, you can drive big fast cars and all the rest of it. And no wonder boys are going that path.
Don't be a sap. Exactly. It is not a mystery to me at all why boys are turning into this man.
And
he's telling them you don't have to be ashamed of who you are. If you tell men for a whole generation that there's something wrong with you and that all of your instincts, I even have this genuinely when you see young boys, and young boys get told off all the time for being naughty. They're not. They're just being boys. Yes. And by the way, again, you meet all these people. I've met so many people who say things like, well, we're having a boy and a girl. We're bringing them up the same. Well, good luck with you with that, because
they're different.
Yeah, they're different, and it's so blatantly obvious. You can literally see the testosterone surges in even 3-year-old boys, 6-year-old boys. You can see it happening, and that sort of they need to be run around, as all children do, run around like dogs, get the energy out of them. And they need to be pumped. But it's very clear that boys and men are being told that they are toxic and that their urges are wrong, that they're patronising if they offer a seat or open a door for a woman or have an urge to protect women, and that every urge they have is wrong and uncivilized. But you know what, as I was saying earlier, when you want someone to tackle a gunman or when the massacre's happening on a beach, you know what, it's a man that does it, who rushes in to tackle the gunman, right? When you want somebody to guard the door of a synagogue when there's some madman outside trying to come in, it's the men who are blocking the doors. It's male sort of armed officers by and large who are shooting dead those criminals on our streets and the terrorists who would do us wrong. Again and again and again, we are looking to it's largely men who are rushing into fires, who are on the lifeboats, who are the police officers. And I know there are lots of women doing those jobs too, but they are a minority. Even when we go to war, it will be men who will be dying, not women by and large. And I just think we've got to, and that's because men are different from women.
Well,
and I just think we've got to stop telling boys and young men that there's something wrong with them simply for being boys or men.
Yeah, and this is where I come back to saying it's a whole society issue. Men and women are different, full stop. And they've got different roles.
It's a good thing.
It's a very good thing, but it's also a biological thing. It's why men produce millions and millions of sperm for a large proportion of their life, but women produce a very finite number of eggs for a relatively small proportion of their life. We're biologically different.
It's why men are more likely to take risks. There's funny memes on social media about this is why women live longer than men. Because men take too many. No, but it's true.
It's so true.
It's true. But and women, and women are much more careful because biologically we were the carers of the children. You're not going to survive in the wild unless you are taking care of your young. It's the reason why we judge a woman who leaves her children far more than we judge a man who leaves his children. We are different. And again, and as a feminist through and through, card carrying capital F, I don't understand why women want to deny the very essence of being a woman.
We should celebrate the difference.
We should celebrate
because
difference.
That's part of being human beings. It's part of our animals. Then but we temper the base animal instincts with what we socialise from a societal perspective. But that socialisation has gone too far into trying to dumb everyone down.
But also, again, the feminisation of schools, the feminisation of a whole society about how people should behave. And actually, again, who are women drawn to? Largely, they're drawn to manly men. I'm sorry, they are. They're drawn to manly men.
Or men who are the bad boys in society, and they're the ones that are violent and will hurt them. That's just wrong.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Let's. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just give us a call 0344 499 1000 and have your say on this. Again, it's supposed to be tackling violence against women and girls. The vast amount of violence that is being committed, is often against women and girls actually in relationships. And when women are killed by male partners, almost entirely of the time, time. The authorities know about the partner. They've been threatening for a long time. They've committed violence before, and nothing is done. Injunction after injunction, and nothing is done. So let's tackle the ones we know about first. That would seem to be an obvious thing. And also, here's an idea, mad idea: don't import tens of thousands of men from misogynistic, violent cultures who think it's okay to sexually assault and rape women and to grab them on the street. Oh yeah, I think that might help. That might help.
It could help a little bit, yes.
Just an idea.
Are we applying common sense here? We are the home of common sense.
But again, Jess Phillips, sweetheart, safeguarding minister, don't tell me you're worried about violence against women and girls. I know you've been campaigning for years in it. You've also been very, very, very happily telling everyone, talking up about the grooming gang scandal in which thousands upon thousands of young women were raped, gang raped on a daily basis for years. You told people to shut up. You actually told people to shut up about it. It was all a bit too difficult to talk about. So really, sorry, you might care about violence against women and girls, but only some people who commit it and only some people who are victims of it. So frankly, Jess, do one. Let's also talk about the Erasmus deal. Most people wouldn't have heard of this. Most people wouldn't have done it. It's a student exchange scheme with the EU. We left the EU. Yay! Still the best thing we've ever done politically in my lifetime. We left the EU. We then started our own scheme, the touring scheme, not just an exchange scheme for EU and Britain, but around the world. Because what with us, having lots of links around the world, Commonwealth countries and loads of the Anglosphere countries, and those Asian countries which are booming and not collapsing their economies like the EU, and with world-class universities, which the EU no longer has since we've left the EU. But we're now told we're going to go back into Erasmus. Two things about it. One, we're told that it's going to cost 8.75 billion quid over a period of years. We could be charged more than $1 billion a year between 28 and 2034, because we're not being told the number, but we know that the EU is putting the price up to be a part of this scheme. We will be taking far more students from the EU than will go. The ones who will go, and the ones who, it's the Jacindas and the bloody Tarquins. It's not your average kid in this country who's able to go on these schemes. But also, is this just a cunning wheeze by our Ramona Prime Minister to basically take us back into the EU bit by bit by bit without us really knowing, boiling that frog until the frog doesn't realise our sovereignty is dead?
Well, it must be, because this is the only reason why it's coming in is Keir Starmer sees it as a political priority. It's a priority that he spends this amount of money against a scheme that already owes us 5.5 billion in what the student loan company has given to EU students from the past version of the scheme, and we're never going to get that back again. So he wants to spend even more at a time whenever he's hitting our farmers with inheritance tax for a very, very small number, smaller than the amount that he's committing to this. He's not funding defence properly and everything else. So he's saying this is a bigger priority over everything else. That's a political decision, and that's just wrong.
And again, no priorities. But again, this is a priority for his North London, Islington, Hampstead dining set, where they love our kids. Isn't it going to be wonderful? We know loads of people do. Do you know where our dearest daughter is this week?
Do you know one person who took part in this, who's saying, "Oh, this is such a good scheme"? Rachel Reeves's sister, who just happens to be a Labour MP.
Cool.
She went to Italy. She spent a year in Italy on the Erasmus scheme.
Go, by all means, go on a scheme. I just don't want to fund it for you.
No, pay for it yourself.
I'm sorry,
And if you can't afford it, don't go.
But also, you can get, you can get jobs. I mean, students. I worked the whole waitressing the whole way through university.
And work
exactly.
around.
Call us old-fashioned. Let's also talk about. You mentioned defence spending. Defence spending in dealing with our own defence and indeed Ukraine, big issue. EU leaders are. I mean, goodness me, not one day goes by without another meeting about Ukraine. There's ongoing peace talks or attempt to get some sort of proper ceasefire as the killing continues in Ukraine. It's not looking very hopeful. We're constantly being told by the Americans it's very hopeful, but less hopeful perhaps from Zelensky's side. But EU leaders are gathering in Brussels for a summit to take a decision about whether to loan Ukraine tens of billions of euros in frozen Russian assets, which are currently in the EU banking system, to fund the military and economic needs. Now, we're told basically around sometime next year, Ukraine's going to run out of money. A lot of countries that were funding it are running out of money. Their economies are in the doldrums. The US is no longer providing any funding, and we need to find that money from somewhere. It seems to me to be bleeding obvious. We take the money from frozen Russian assets. Russians don't want that to happen. They want that money back, please. The Americans, it seems, agree with the Russians. Do you think that money, A, should be sent to help the war effort in Ukraine? It should be helping to rebuild Ukraine, in my view. It's easy reparations. And B, do you think it will?
There's about $300 billion that are held, $200 billion in Belgian exchange banks. Yes, I think it should be, because Russia illegally invaded Ukraine, attacked it and destroyed it. And that is sensible money to be unfrozen and taken out and given to Ukraine so that it can sustain its country.
Because right now it's earning interest for those banks, and they're getting that money. Those banks have still got the money,
the interest is being used to fund Ukraine. So there's been a political decision. I interviewed Sir Bill Browder yesterday, and he was saying part of the reason why he thinks the Belgian government and the Belgian banks aren't
just to explain, because this money is held in an organisation called Euroclear, and it's based in Belgium.
Yes.
Belgians have been very worried about this because they think the Russians are going to come after them for it.
Well, he believes that the head of Euroclear and a number of Belgian politicians have had their lives threatened by Russia, and that is why they are very reluctant to make a decision to release this. And that makes infinite sense.
Kind of makes it even more important that Russia is defeated.
Correct.
That's kind of thing, isn't it? And in terms of like, it's interesting to hear Starmer yesterday threatening to seize £2.5 billion from Roman Abramovich, the former Chelsea FC boss. Basically, he, big mate of Putin. He basically was sort of, hounded out of the country and assets seized, along with many other the oligarchs. But basically, that the sale of the Chelsea FC was supposed to, this £2.5 billion was supposed to go to humanitarian causes in Ukraine. That's never actually happened. But yesterday, Prime Minister told MPs and PMQs that Abramovich must pay up now. He's issued a formal licence for long-promised funds to be released, and if he doesn't, he'll face legal action. Do you think we'll ever see the money?
Well, I hope so. This should have happened by now. And
he was 22, for goodness sake.
Yeah, exactly. And Abramovich's lawyers are trying to argue that it's for those that are suffered from war on both sides. So
and it's up to them for how to spend it.
Exactly. And this is where I do hope this is one example where Keir Starmer will step up and actually take the lead and do something. But I suspect it's not going to happen.
No, exactly. I mean, come on. Again, what if you had to put money on it? I mean, given it's on my last show of the year, last time I'm going to get to talk to you about this. I mean, everyone's talking about there needs to be a peace deal. There should be some sort of ceasefire. We know what the Russians are demanding is ridiculous, and the Americans seem to be giving them far too much backing. Do you think there will be, in the next few weeks, months, a ceasefire in Ukraine? And do you think there will ever be a peace deal?
No, because the one person that doesn't want it is Vladimir Putin, and the one person that can't afford it is Vladimir Putin.
Do you think that if Trump's not going to step up and he's basically, inexplicably on the side of Russia on this, and the only explanation is that he is compromised. I'm sorry, there is no other explanation on this. That's not Trump derangement syndrome. I'm just judging. He's so right on Israel, so wrong on Ukraine. It's unbelievable. Do you think that the EU is willing and able, crucially, to step up to help continue the war effort in Ukraine?
I think there are elements of the EU that leaders in the EU that are willing. Whether they've got the support of their parliaments and their countries because their political turmoil going, that's a different matter. Or is the EU, if it can get its act together, able? Of course it is. Russia's got an annual budget of about $2.3 trillion. The EU's got an annual budget of about $220 trillion. We can outspend Russia easily, and that's without America coming in.
Do you know what we could also try doing is stopping buying any more Russian oil and gas in the European Union, so that they're still helping to fund both sides of the war effort.
And properly sanction the Shadow Fleet tankers and start to properly sanction a lot of the other Russian interests that are around the place. And we could
Why have they not done that? I mean, the war's almost 4 years old.
We could bankrupt Russia within 12 months without any problems whatsoever.
And we could have done that
Oh, we could
First
have done
time
that
round.
first time round.
So we're so weak in the West,
Yeah.
aren't we? We're so weak.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. Lots of calls coming in about this bid to tackle misogyny and boys getting lessons in class on tackling misogyny, to tackle violence against women and girls. Also, of course, people finally being arrested for shouting "Globalise the Intifada." Why didn't that happen on October the 8th, 2023? You could ask. We'll get to your calls up next. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
To deter the migrants.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:29 is the time. Coming up, we're going to be talking about those anti-misogyny courses for boys as young as 11 years old with the chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, Chris McGovern. First of all, let's get to your calls on it. Grace is on the line in London. She's given us a call on 0344 499 1000. Good morning to you, Grace. What do you want to say?
Hi. I don't think these lessons are a bad idea, but I don't think that they'll necessarily solve the problem as much as some people might like to think. And as I'm sure you and many of your viewers would agree, we can't rely on the state to solve all kinds of issues necessarily. I think, one hears about role models in the course of this discussion. I think to myself, I don't really remember thinking about role models when I was growing up.
No.
And then it occurs to me that I was being, taken to Sunday school and what have you by my parents. And I didn't really believe in that until I was older. I looked at the evidence. But I did hear that Jesus taught us that we ought to try to respect others, and we ought to be self-sacrificial, and we ought to be caring and aim towards those things. And I know that I fail at those things again and again, but I thought to myself, that's what one ought to try to do.
Yeah.
And it was helpful to have that kind of direction because, particularly as someone on the autistic spectrum, I'm bad at knowing about how to relate to other people.
Yeah,
so it was helpful to
have someone tell you that. But did you have relationships you could see that was family, friends, neighbours, whatever, who were showing you, or at school showing you how women should be treated and how men should be treated and mutual respect?
Very much so, yes. And people, my parents, I'm so privileged to have parents who are very much, supportive and caring towards each other as well as towards us. And it was definitely an environment in which there were these positive values. Yeah.
So that was the norm. But lots of boys are growing up, that's not even in the house.
And I feel like our society had that aim for a while. I mean, misogyny has been a problem throughout human history, unfortunately, but we did for a while think that this particular bloke, Jesus, who taught us to care for others and be respectful of others, was a thing to aim towards. He was a good guidepost. But now we're kind of losing that, and we're moving towards this cultural relativism. I mean, you'll have heard this week that the BMJ published something saying that it might be okay to carry out FGM on little girls.
Oh, you're kidding me! I didn't see that.
And we're losing.
Oh my God.
We're losing the kind of standards that we had to.
Yeah, well, again, as you say, because we're no longer standing up for the values of this country, which are. Look, I'm an atheist. You're a religious believer, but but our culture is based on Judeo-Christian teaching. Really appreciate that call, Grace. Really interesting. I always love it when you call. You always have a really interesting perspective. Thank you so much. Let's go to Mark, who's on the line in Manchester. Mark, you want to talk about this change in tune on globalising the Intifada by the police and whether or not people should be arrested for it.
Yes, that's right. Good morning, Julia. I just wanted to give you a personal perspective. I've been to a number of pro-Palestinian marches in Manchester that have ranged from hundreds demonstrating to thousands. I think the largest one was 5,000 to 6,000. All starts off very peacefully with the Palestine Solidarity campaign with the little trestle tables handing out banners and scarves and this sort of thing. And I've collected hours of video from my mobile phone. And we understand as Jews what it means to globalise the Intifada.
Yes.
But when you have thousands of people parading in front of you, actually drawing the forefinger across their throat, directly looking at you.
One of those was a doctor.
Yeah, one of those was a doctor, absolutely. We understand the message very clearly, but then we come on to the two-tier policing system. I was stood on the pavement on the side of the counter-demonstrators. I stepped off the pavement taking a video, and I was quite harshly physically pushed back by a police officer.
Very interesting.
I made a complaint to the Greater Manchester Police. I had the constable's number. It was quite astounding to find out that none of the police officers had their video cams on at the time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Surprise, surprise. Yeah, surprise, surprise. And the complaint wasn't taken any further by GMP. I just received an apology.
Yeah. But again, the policing of you as a peaceful bystander watching it and recording it was very, very instant. But it hasn't been over people shouting to literally kill as many Jews as you can worldwide, which is what globalise the Intifada means.
This is the problem, and this is the biggest problem with the two-tier policing system. And I really, really do hope that these changes, will help, combat this. I mean, I have friends who are in the Jewish Representative Council. They have repeatedly, over the last 2 years, extended the hand of peace over to the imams and the Muslim councils. They refused to meet the Jewish Representative Council, only in secrecy. Yes, only in secrecy, in case they're seen to be siding
that's very telling, Mark. Thank you. I'm going to have to leave it there, but thank you. Appreciate that call. Very interesting. Coming up, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to talk to Chris McGovern about whether or not these lessons for schoolboys about how not to be a misogynist, how not to commit violence or rape against women and girls. Is that going to work? We'll find out. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and Philip Ingram is also with me, former senior military intelligence officer. Let's get the thoughts right now of my next guest. He's Chris McGovern. He's chairman of the Campaign for Real Education and joins us to talk about this plan to basically, halve violence against women and girls over the next 10 years, according to the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, with the production of, apparently this is now the third different government that's produced a plan on how to tackle violence against women and girls. And part of it is going to include what we teach boys at school. Boys and girls, but particularly boys, they're going to be taught how to respect women and girls and not to be looking to the likes of the Andrew Tates online, but instead to know how to treat women with respect and to, not sexually assault or rape them. Chris McGovern, do we need to teach boys that in school?
Well, to some extent, schools already do this. I guess this latest initiative, the best one can say is well-intentioned, but then the path to hell is full of good intentions. It's tinkering with the system. There's a very simple solution to the problem, and it is a very real problem in our schools, misogyny. And it's a solution you do already see in some schools. That is, have single-sex schools. There's no misogyny in all girls' schools, particularly from 11 to 16, but perhaps that crucial time of children coming to puberty and so forth. If you have single-sex schools, that solves the problem. At least they should be available to parents. And in addition,
they're large. I'm going to a very unusual thing, which was a comp that was all girls. Just where I grew up, randomly, all the schools but one in the entire city were single-sex. But and I've sent my daughter to single-sex school. I was always told if you've got a girl, you send her to a single-sex school if you can, and especially in secondary. And if you've got a boy, you want to send him to a mixed school because boys do better when they've also got girls there. But isn't that more about how they learn and how their brains work, as opposed to, because it's all very well, okay, so boys aren't going to be misogynistic at school, but when they leave school, they're going to have the same views, and then girls are going to be mixing with them in the pubs or at the park or in the workplace.
And that's true, it's a fair point, but historically, of course, we have had single-sex schools. Really post-war that we've become co-ed. And I think the fact is we need to protect girls. The problem is quite serious.
Protect girls?
That from those crucial period, from 11 to 16 in particular, then if you take the girls away from the boys and the boys away from the girls, you don't have that problem. Yes, of course, in later life, but the girls are older and the boys are older by that time.
No, but hold on a minute. No, but does that teach the boy? That just stops them having access to the girls to sort of upskirt them or taunt them or whatever during that time. But then they're going to be out of school. They're not only coming across girls in the behind the school gates. They're outside in the real world too. And then they're going to go to university or go to an apprenticeship or go into the workplace. And then there are going to be girls. They're not necessarily going to know how to behave. I've met a whole load of those, boarding school boys who hadn't got a clue how to speak to a woman. When you say, look, you're a former head teacher and a former Ofsted inspector, you know your stuff about schools. When you say we do have a problem, what is the actual problem with misogyny in schools? What is going on?
Well, part of it, of course, is to do with social media. The other line of attack I would put forward to you on this problem is that we should follow the Australian example, and we should exclude young under 16 from using social media, because a lot of the pressure, the Tate stuff, this horrible toxic masculinity, a lot of it comes via social media. Look, I'm offering a suggestion, very drastic solutions when I say go co-ed, or have the option of co-ed, or ban social media for under 16s. These are drastic solutions, but there are real problems in school, and not only is it girls in the schools who may be getting problems. There's also female teachers. The majority of staff in schools are female teachers, and they're also getting a dose of this toxic masculinity.
Isn't that part of the problem? But part of that issue, then, surely, isn't it the breakdown of discipline? Because, if a boy thinks he can say something outrageously sexist or horrific to a female teacher, part of the fact there's barely any male teachers, certainly at primary school, there are barely any at all in the classrooms, not enough in secondary schools either, I would say, strong males to sort of keep order, who young boys, growing teenage lads full of testosterone are going to respect. But also the general breakdown of discipline, that those boys think they can get away with it.
Well, there has been, I think, a breakdown of discipline in recent years, and teachers aren't given enough support, but either by their head teachers or by the government. They need support. There needs to be exclusion units. So we do need to support teachers. But it's, to some extent, what's going on in schools reflects what's going on in the streets.
Exactly.
What's going on in the streets is coming into the schools. But you really do need firm leadership. You need good teachers. I find, Julia, when you have good teaching, the problems tend to disappear. You have to engage the boys, of course you do. But also boys themselves are underachieving. White working class boys are the bottom of the pile. To some extent, they're lashing out. I'm not making excuses for
No, I completely agree with you. I also think we've got this massive issue. We've been talking about it all morning of, telling boys and young men that everything about them and everything of their instincts, everything about their behaviour and every urge they have is wrong and bad and evil and toxic, and not celebrating the differences between men and women. But when we need help, women, we're very happy to call on the men. But another thing, you talked about what's happening in the social media and what's happening on the streets, but also what's happening at home. Not only are there not many good, strong male role models for these young boys at school, a lot of them don't have it at home either.
They don't, and too many homes are single parent. And that is certainly a problem. But look, I go back when I finished although I taught a lot of my career in large comprehensives, I finished it in an all-boys school. Mm-hmm. There were no problems of misogyny, zero. So much around the world, there are
hold on a minute. You don't know that because you don't know what they were doing outside school.
I'm talking about in the school.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not. This isn't a policy to tackle violence against women and girls in school. It's about teaching them from a young age about how they'll behave in their daily lives outside school and in their future lives.
Yeah, and we may disagree on this, but many societies, many people would agree with me. What I would say is allow parents the option to choose a single-sex school. There isn't very much choice in terms of state schools at the moment, which is single-sex. I'm really saying give it a go. Look,
okay.
Maybe
I'm not convinced that is the solution. I think that's just delaying the problem until they turn up at university or turn up in the workplace. If they've got those attitudes.
They're not 13, they're not 12, they're older, they're more able to cope. But give the choice, let parents decide that, because we must support parents too. They're also stranded with this problem. And most of all, though, the single greatest solution is to do what the Australians do. For heaven's sake, stop these young kids getting onto this social media and tormenting each other. Yeah. That's the best way forward. I'm a liberal, I believe in choice.
Yeah. But not for under 18s. I'm with you on that one. I'm an adult. I'm the one in charge. I'm always like, you're on the payroll. You live under my roof. Then I'm in charge. End of, nothing to discuss. But this thing. Again, I would certainly go further. I certainly am of the view that any school that has that, if your phone is allowed to be in your hand at any point after you've passed the school gates, that school hasn't got their act together.
I think also in the past year you supported grammar schools.
100% support grammar. I have a grammar school in every single area, yes.
Most grammar schools are single sex.
Yeah, they are.
There you go.
Yeah, that's very interesting giveaway. Thank you very much, Chris McGovern. Thank you for that. Interesting perspective there from Chris McGovern, Philip Ingram. Again, I'm not entirely sure that is the solution. And again, I never come across this issue, and I haven't come across it as a parent because of going to single-sex schooling. But most schooling in this country is mixed sex. But isn't that just delaying the problem?
Well, I don't think it's delaying the problem. I think it may give children the ability to learn as they're going through this difficult hormonal period, learn what's right and wrong. I went to a single-sex school between the age of 11 and 18, and the majority of the teachers that were there were male because it was a single-sex male school. The girls' school was at the other end of the rugby ground. And we used to mix a lot.
Look longingly over each other.
But the girls, the majority of the teachers there were female, and therefore when you're going through those difficult hormonal periods, and we all had good parenting, or the majority had good parenting, but when you're going through those difficult hormonal periods, you had role models. Yeah. And it was a voluntary grammar school, which was unique to Northern Ireland, a different way of doing things, but it meant that you didn't have to do pay fees and everything else, and it just worked.
Interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. What is the solution? Again, I was wondering whether misogyny and sexual violence is getting worse against women. I think we're now talking about it more, and it's more acceptable.
Becoming
more open about it. I don't think necessarily. I don't necessarily think it is getting worse. I think you got the Andrew Tates and things like that. I think it's one of those things that we are talking about more, but I think the internet is definitely a problem. It's definitely a problem, but it's a problem for young women as well as young men as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to be talking about migration, of course, very much linked to violence against women and girls, because the spate of cases that we've got of people who've arrived, whether it's on the small boats or arrived legally, overstayed visas or whatever, who are committing violence against women and girls on our streets. But even when you talk about legal migration, we're going to be talking about that up next, with people bringing their foreign partners. So even a Brit born and bred here, falls in love abroad, brings their foreign partner to the UK. How much is that costing us? Well, the figure is eye-watering. We'll talk about that to Danny Shaw up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:51 is almost the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is a Home of Common Sense. Let's talk about migration and two very interesting stories in the news today with Danny Shaw, who's a Home Affairs commentator, of course. Good morning to you, Danny.
Hi, Julia.
Hi, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, there's a story, it's interesting, about the basically Migration Advisory Committee, watchdog and advisors to the government on the cost of foreign spouses, foreign partners who are brought to this country by people who, are British born here, people who've got right to live here, and they bring their other halves. And I think a lot of people will be really surprised by quite how much that is a cost to the taxpayer. Tell us about it.
Yes, the Migration Advisory Committee, which is a group of experts that advises the government, have done some calculations. From 2022-2023, that year, 51,000 people came as partners, partners of people who were legally in the UK. They'd been in a relationship for 2 years or more, so they were allowed to come to Britain. Those are the rules.
Can't just be someone you met on holiday.
No. God, can you imagine?
Oh, I think we could. We're delving
romances.
into Danny's past there wonderfully. There's a story there, I can tell.
A long time ago. So over half of them are unemployed. The net fiscal cost was £109,000 compared to
per arrival.
Per person, compared to people who are British residents, which is £110,000 contributing.
But that's over a lifetime, isn't it? It's basically. But I'm assuming somebody who arrives in this country from living abroad, they've had to leave their job. They don't have a job when they arrive. Is any evidence, though, that they do get a job when they get here?
No, a lot of them end up not working. I think the employment rate is 65% after a short period of time, but then that goes down as they get older. And obviously, when they're here for some time, they can access the NHS and other benefits.
Yeah.
And that's why it costs the taxpayer, the government, all of us more money.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons, I think, why the government has tried to tighten the rules around that, particularly with regard to people who are given refugee status.
Yeah,
because
bringing in their partners.
As soon as they were allowed granted refugee status, they were allowed to bring family members in, which seems
and I think a lot of people
loose.
would see a big difference between someone who is British, born in this country, who then goes and works abroad, lives abroad, meets somebody in another country, falls in love with them, marries them, and then wants to come back and live here. Maybe family's getting older, or they want to have kids here. And they can't. And I've spoken to so many people over the years who say, we just, because of my income, it doesn't hit the salary threshold and it keeps going up and up by, £1,000. Because I'm not a big earner myself, even though I'm a British citizen, I can't bring my wife or my husband in, but someone who is wealthy can. And I think most of us would feel that's not the kind of limitation we want. If it's a genuine relationship and you're British, you should be allowed to bring your partner in. But I think we draw the line for people who have been allowed to come to this country, even if they then get that status, to then be able to bring people in. I think those are very different rights, surely.
I think you're absolutely right. I think someone that's, born in the UK and has lived here, falls in love with someone from abroad, and after 2 years or more long-term relationship, they want to live together, perhaps have a family. That is very different from someone who's recently come to the UK, been allowed to stay and can bring their family in. I think you're absolutely right, and I think the government is trying to make a sharper distinction. Just one thing, what this analysis did by the Migration Advisory Committee, it didn't take account of the children who couples will then have, who may actually contribute to the economy.
But they also are a cost when they're going to state schools.
They may do, but because they're more likely to be younger, they're more likely to be of working age and therefore contributing.
Yeah.
Very complex.
Well, that's it. These things are, but these things are complex, aren't they? At the end of the day, British citizens, we cost a lot of money when we're, the early years for, being born and then their education, and then the latter years of the benefits. Even if you're, a fully contributing working member of society, and the vast majority, in the country are not net contributors in terms of the actual money they cost. That's why people who are very rich pay more tax and all the other taxes to help pay for everything. But this is about looking at whole life contributions, and as we're seeing again and again, a lot of people who come here legally because they're on low earnings, and once they get the right to stay here, definitely to remain, and this has all been exposed, I think, for a lot of people who wouldn't have known in the last 6 months or so, then they get entitled to benefits. Often then they don't carry on working, or they're still getting extra help, and actually they're not net contributors. Then they retire and they cost frankly a small fortune. And funnily enough, it turns out that mass immigration of people on low incomes and low skilled work isn't the economic boom that we were told it was going to be.
No, but I think what you have to remember is that we had a period of time where governments were encouraging people to come to the UK to fill those jobs, to do those low-paid jobs that British-born workers just didn't want to do. And we had the Boris wave after Brexit of the lax sort of controls around foreign workers, which allowed hundreds of thousands of people to come in, a net migration approaching 1 million, I think. 1 year.
Well, we was talking on the show yesterday about the Policy Exchange think tank saying we need to have an emergency census to actually find out how many of these people, the best part of 4 million people. We have no idea who's in this country. We have no idea how many people have arrived, how many people have left. The overstayers on student visas, visas, on work visas, we know is on a grand scale, apart from the illegal arrivals themselves on the boats, on the lorries. We haven't got a clue how many people are in this country. We're told we're around the 70 million mark. I'd be surprised if it's not about 5 million higher than that.
Well, it's 4 years since the last census, wasn't it? And I think there's a very good point to say, because of the inflows, that you need a more up-to-date figure, and that will help plan housing, education and other services as well. That's the whole point of having a census.
Exactly, and a lot of these figures are often wrong anyway, aren't they? Because the chairman of the Migration Advisory Committee, Professor Brian Bell, also pointed out yesterday the overall migration figure would jump in the median term for the current levels of around 204,000 to around 300,000 after 3 years of sharp falls. Basically, it's gone down as a result after the Boris wave when we all found out about it. But net migration, the number of people coming over, the number of people leaving, is set to increase. But by the way, one of the reasons those figures don't look as bad as they have been is because so many Brits are leaving. 250,000 Brits left last year.
Yeah, there's also quite a lot of British people who are returning as well, which is also counted. But no, I mean, net migration is going to go up. It's forecast to around 300,000, and that's principally because of the surge in asylum seekers and also family visas, which the Migration Advisory Committee says are the two hardest sort of areas to tackle, to bring down. So you can tackle foreign workers coming in, you can put restrictions there, but we have people switching to claim asylum, and we have people coming across illegally through the channel. And as we've seen, as we talked about many times, that is really hard to stop.
Absolutely. Really good to talk to you, Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator. Danny Shaw, thank you for joining us. Philip Ingram, I mean, calmiest show we've ever done. We've not ended up talking about migration. The main thing is now we actually are talking about it. We're actually talking about the real numbers. We're actually, we're actually getting people having a chance to actually know what's really going on and how much it's costing us.
And when people come in, whether it be a partner of someone who's legitimately in this country or a citizen of this country and all the rest of it, there should be a net contribution score to society. And that should rely on financial, cultural, societal and everything else. And it should be looked at from a long-term perspective. And if someone's coming in to not work, then the whole family has to have a bigger score before they're allowed to stay.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's, again, even though those spouse rules, they were brought in to stop people just bringing in sort of, basically arranged marriages from India and Pakistan.
They're still coming in.
But it also ended up affecting Brits who've been here, who've lived all their lives here, but other than worked abroad, found someone else they fell in love with, and they weren't able to bring them to live with them. It's extraordinary. Coming up, we're going to take a quick break, get the news. We're going to have the Bank of England decision on interest rates. Will there be a cut? And we'll also talk to Ian Duncan-Smith about all the big stories in the news. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for joining me, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. Great to have your company, especially this is the last show of mine of the year. I'm heading off my holes. You know me. I like my sunny Christmas day. So I won't be with you again until January. Coming up at 1 o'clock, Kev is standing in for Ian Collins, so he'll be here to tell us what's happening on his show. Just the breaking news in the last couple of moments. The Bank of England has announced, yes, another cut finally to interest rates down to 3.75%. Great news if you've got one of those horrible variable mortgages or heading towards your fixed rate coming down. Not great news if you're a saver. Not, as I don't know whether you've noticed this as well as me, not that actually any of these banks and building societies pass on the rate rises when we get them, but they're always very quick to pass on those rate cuts when you've got the savings, aren't they? But it's the first time since January 2023 that the rates have gone below 4%, and many economists have been expecting rates to fall after they were held, of course, at 4% last month in a split decision from the Monetary Policy Committee. Coming up, we're going to be talking a bit more about that. We'll be talking about whether or not that Erasmus exchange scheme with the EU for students is actually really going to cost us 8 billion quid over a few years, and whether or not it's actually just trying to take us back into the EU by the back door by the Ramona Prime Minister. We're also going to be talking more about the government announcing their strategy to tackle violence against women and girls. It includes schoolboys as young as 11 getting lessons on how not to be a misogynist. But is that really the answer? And we're going to be talking about how the British Museum is going to share artefacts from its collections with former colonies to help them decolonise, because once again we've got hand-wringers in the liberal academic classes basically being ashamed of everything in Britain's past. Oh yes, and we've also got the absolute lunatics claiming that a Christmas card on the shelves at Sainsbury's was transphobic. It was a calm deemed offences for featuring a cartoon of Dr. Seuss's Grinch character alongside the caption, "This Christmas I'm identifying as a Grinch." Apparently, describing the phrase, using the phrase identifying as in this context is an anti-trans dog whistle. My goodness me. You'd be amazed by the lack of complaints on my show then, but there we are. Anyway, all that coming up, plenty more besides. Joining me, you've heard a little chuckle. It's Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, looking far less Grinchy than that Grinch and that caption. If you are watching, you'll already have seen or seen any of the clips we put out on social media already from the show. But if you're listening on the radio, you are missing out, folks, because you're missing out on the loudest jacket in Christendom. And this is Philip Ingram dressed as a decorated Christmas tree.
I identify as a Christmas tree.
You absolutely identify.
No, the complaints will come in.
So I got accused. I went to talk to some talk at Oxford University once for a very sensible bunch of people who managed to get a load of unsensible people sitting in the front row looking very angry at me as trans activists. And I know, I mean, God bless them. And they said, I think my I had my pronouns in my bio on social media at the time as Your Imperial Majesty, you and / Your Imperial Majesty, and they didn't like that one bit. And they said, well, why do you have that? I said, because it's funny. And they said, it isn't. I went, well, maybe to you.
I identify as Her Imperial Majesty. There we go.
Mate, once you're an empress, there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. Now
Your Majesty.
Now my pronouns are me, because that's what pronouns are about, isn't it? But anyway, that breaking news, Bank of England cutting interest rates to 2.75%. We'll find out more about that. Let's talk to our first guest of this hour. Delighted to welcome to the show Sir Ian Duncan-Smith MP, former Conservative Party leader, of course. Good afternoon to you, Sir Ian.
Good afternoon, Julie.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. He's wearing, by the way, Philip, he's wearing a sensible jacket, not dressed as a Christmas tree.
I've got one outside.
Because he's a grown-up. Sir Ian, if you can see this jacket, Sir Ian. I must ask you first of all about that Bank of England interest rate cut. A lot of people were hoping and waiting for that. Good news, bad news?
Well, an interest rate cut is good news because the pressure on people who particularly have earnings, etc., rather payouts and things, mortgages, it's going to be helpful to them, no question at all. The problem is it's a little bit of a gamble because they still haven't reached their 2% target for the Bank of England.
For interest. No, that's not for inflation.
Yeah, exactly right. So they haven't. And there's a bit of a problem because they're higher than expected increases in pricing on a lot of hospitality areas. So it may well be something that stalls next time round, or may even have to go up. I'm a bit pessimistic about it at the moment because the economy is not doing great. You've got huge amounts of unemployment now growing. And you've also got lots and lots of people who are coming out of universities unable to find their jobs. So there is a problem in the economy which underpins the nature of where interest rates go. And I think whilst this is coming down because there was a slightly better than expected set of figures, nonetheless, as we saw in the last quarter's figures, actually the economy shrank.
Yeah.
So
and it keeps doing that.
Let's grab this when we can. But the honest truth is, under this government, it looks to me like it's not going to be long lasting.
Yeah, most of the numbers are not going in the right direction, we can safely say. What do you make of this Erasmus deal? We were told it's going to cost about $500,000 a year, rather more than I think most people are willing to pay for it, for a deal where basically we go back into this deal which is run by the EU, where students from universities in the EU and others can come to the UK to study, and we basically subsidise them. I don't know why we're doing that. And then our students are going over to Europe and able to subsidise it. It's only a handful. I mean, it's just a few thousand students. It's not a big scheme at all. But it does cost a lot of money. And we're told, actually, over a period, if we go in from 2027, we know what it costs them, but the EU is planning to double their spending on it pretty much, that from 2028 to 2034, we could end up spending more than £8 billion on this scheme to basically subsidise the Jacintas and the Tarquins of Britain and Europe to have go on a lovely little exchange scheme. Is it good value for money?
No, it was never good value for money, and now it's got worse. I mean, the truth is, if you look at it, the vast majority of the scheme are European students coming to the UK. And the reason for that is the UK, second only to the US, has its top universities in the top 10, top 20, top 30, top 40. I think you have to get to about the top 30 or 40 before a European university actually enters in the scale. And therefore, an awful lot of, I don't blame the European students wanting to come across to the UK to visit places like Oxford, Cambridge, London University, Bristol, all these top universities that we've got here, because, you know, it does them good. But what I do complain is that, you know, that's more than double the number of students, British students, that ever used it. About 15,000, I think, was the number that went in last time round, whereas about between 30 and 40,000.
Yeah, and what a surprise,
European
because so
students
few of our students study foreign languages and could manage it, whereas across Europe, you know, if you're educated at that level, you speak pretty much fluent English, because all your films, all your music, all your telly that you're watching is all in English. It's the second language of the world. So, and by the way, we don't have mass youth unemployment, not yet. We're on the way. We're doing our best to get it. So there's good reason to come here.
So Erasmus was a bad project anyway, even if you were in favour of the European Union or not. It was a bad project. The Turin project that we set up is far better because it's not limited to Europe.
Yeah.
They're doing more and more. They were doing more and more negotiations, opening up other countries around the world, which is much more interesting, and particularly for British students, because a lot of those countries will be Commonwealth countries.
Yeah.
A good exchange between them is much more interesting and more useful to them.
Yeah.
And also, it's English language, common law, all those sort of areas they can do some proper studies. And it tends, as I think you've indicated with your reference to the naming of any particular student called Tarquin, but the reality is it did, in fact.
We have a lovely Tarquin who's a regular caller on this show. I mentioned Sebastian. We have a family member called Sebastian, but you know what I'm
I know what you mean.
We know exactly what I mean. But also,
it benefit only those wealthier students.
Philip Ingram pointed out earlier that we've also in the old scheme, you know, EU students coming over, and of course, you know, they get they're entitled to get those loans under that scheme, for which, you know, tuition fees, because of course tuition fees at European Union universities are usually in the hundreds, just a couple £100 if there is fees at all, whereas £9,500 in the UK. Yeah. And £5.5 billion is still owed by EU students who took out those loans, have no intention of paying that money back, never started paying. We can't track them down. They'll never get that money back. We are subsidising the youth of Europe to get a better education.
I agree, and the biggest problem is this is quite clearly a foretaste of the inch-by-inch
that was my next question
to the European Union. And the government doesn't want to do it out loud, so what they do is they introduce little bits and pieces. It's quite clear that the European Union has basically demanded a significant, hefty price for us to rejoin this. It's part of the process that says the step-by-step process, you will come back in, but you have to join Erasmus. The honest truth is it's bad news for us generally, but it's also stupid politics. What they've been far better would have done, using some of that money that they're now going to pay to the EU, if they've got that money, let's look at how we take the burden of the student fees of far too many people who didn't get the kind of jobs that they were expected to get post-university, and try and give them some way out of the debt that they're in, which means they're unable to put mortgages down or anything else.
Exactly. The interest rate on these debts are absolutely astonishing. And I know loads of people, they're paying a fortune every year from a very, average or below average income, and they're not paying off a single penny of the actual debt. They're just paying the interest. We are into, frankly, loan shark territory here, I think, for a lot of young people.
And the government, I was always deeply concerned about the nature of what we'd done with the student fees. I know there was a reason to try and get some of that money, as it were, paid for by those who were supposed to get higher jobs. But I think the levels at which they're at, or even possibly might go to, are ridiculous now, and we've got real problems amongst student debt. So why do they bother with Erasmus? Why not get on and try and help the students in some way or another? That would have been a much more thing. It would have actually all sides of the House of Commons would have joined in.
Well,
on
indeed. But you mentioned this is inch by inch, step by step, trying to say, kick us back in. And a lot of people say, oh, no, no, no. And Keir Starmer say, oh, no, 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 of course not. They were very clear in their Labour manifesto this time round. Last time round in 2019, of course, they wanted a second referendum because we didn't know what we were voting for, Ian. We were just a bit confused, probably a bit racist, didn't know what we were doing. And then we found out what Brexit was, and we'd have the option of basically stopping it from happening in the first place. That failed. They didn't get elected, thank goodness. But they still want to take us back in. We know that Keir Starmer is a Ramona to his absolute soul. What else has he done to try and sort of just get us back in? And what else do you think he's going to do to try and just shift us just closer and closer and closer till we get to the point where they say, you know what, we're taking these rules, we're rule takers, but we're not rule makers. We want a seat back at the table. Why don't we join again?
I think the main thing is that he's already started. I mean, the addressing the trade arrangements that we had, giving in to Europe further over things like SPS foods, etc. Also on Northern Ireland, no action there whatsoever, the ridiculous kind of tariffs that we're having to pay. Instead of trying to iron that out, what he's actually trying to do is get closer and closer. Yeah. Fishing, for example, another give-in to the European Union.
A massive giveaway. I mean, a massive giveaway of decades.
So there's loads of this going on. But the main thing about all of this is this ridiculous nonsense from people like the Liberal Democrats and others. Somehow we would be 2.5% or so better off, and therefore that would amount to billions that we'd be paying in tax. 9 billion, I think, at one point was the figure. First of all, these were all misused figures. But secondly, if it was as that after Brexit, we would have had to have grown in the EU at about the level of USA growth over the same period of Brexit. No country in Europe has achieved any of that. In fact, Germany and France, who are two of the big countries in Europe, have had terrible economies, worse than ours, over the last 7 or 8 years, and in trouble still today. Look at France. Now, if that's the truth about it, Europe has been shrinking in terms of its global trade. This idea that all we have to do is step back into the EU to grow again, the growth lies outside the EU, not in it. And trade arrangements, etc., are part of what we need to do to remind ourselves that even at the height of our time in the EU, we didn't do half our trade with the European Union. Yeah. We did more around the rest of the world, particularly with the United States. So the absurdity about having to go back is purely political. It has nothing to do with money or figures or development of the UK economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are utterly obsessed with it. Again, whenever they talk about damage to our economy, look, when people don't feel the benefit, the small matter of lockdown, the small matter of the Ukraine war and the impact on energy and cost of living, I mean, no, nothing to do with it. It's because of Brexit, even though, of course, as you say, the German and French economies and other economies in Europe are doing not just as badly, but even worse than ours. It is mind-blowing frankly, how much the sort of cognitive dissonance is going on in that case. Let me ask you about basically the meeting that's going on right now in Brussels, because EU leaders are facing a decision on loaning Russia's frozen billions to Ukraine. Most of Russia's £185 billion worth of assets in the EU held in the Belgium-based organisation Euroclear, and there's been a lot of talk about trying to get that money and basically funding it, giving it to Ukraine, because they're going to be basically running out of money. Do you think that money will actually be sent, or at least some of it will be sent, to help the Ukrainian war effort? And if it's not, are EU countries either willing or able to actually step up and fund Ukraine's war effort?
Well, this is really interesting. I've been calling for that money to be seized for some considerable time. Russia is at war with Ukraine. It has broken all the tenets of peaceful coexistence. They want their territory. They actually want to take Ukraine back into Russia so that it is no longer an independent state. Over 1.5 million Russians themselves have either died or been severely wounded, about 400,000 Ukrainians. We're talking about First World War scale disaster in Ukraine in terms of the warfare, the injuries, the terrible numbers of people. I think 50,000 Ukrainians are now looking to get false limbs because they're in a queue. There's so many in demand of it. All of this goes on. Russia must pay the price. Now, we can't rely on Russia to pay reparations at the end of the war or to pay any towards damages. They won't. So we need to take it off them now while their money sits there. The one problem is America. Yep. America was in favor of this, and Trump was to begin with in favor of doing it, but he keeps blowing hot and cold, and now he's blowing very cold on it, warning the Europeans that they mustn't do this. The honest truth is this is money that Russia owes already to Ukraine for that unwarranted war and for the death toll and for the damage. Every day, bombing and rocketing cities. I do wish Mr. Trump occasionally would just face reality with President Putin. He is not a good man. He's a bad man, and he is running his own country into rack and ruin, and at the same time killing others. Yeah. We need to deal with him, otherwise he will come again. And when he comes again, other countries in Europe will face that.
Well, indeed, and we've had a lot of discussion, and lots of former and current senior military figures, including the chief of the armed forces, have been chiefs of defence staff, talking about how the threat is very real, and we need to step up, prepare our sons and daughters even for war. It's interesting to see that Kemi Badenoch, your party leader, has announced that she would axe taxpayer funding for vanity schemes and funnel cash into boosting the UK's war readiness. Net zero projects, nonsense research grants and things would be scrapped to divert £17 billion towards funding our defences. Now, most experts, I think, would say that that's not enough money, but she wants to create a £50 billion defence fund through green cuts. I mean, we need to spend a lot of money, and there's a lot of money being spent by the government right now, and by the way, was spent under the last Tory government as well, which we could cut easily to fund that, isn't there?
Hallelujah is what I say to Kemi's decision, because we need to get more money definitely into defence for two good reasons. The first is we are way below the level that we should be in terms of being able to protect the citizens of the United Kingdom. First priority of government, defence of the realm. We're not capable of doing it. And this government's slow snail crawl up from 2.5 to 2.6 would be risible if it wasn't so dangerous. So we need now to give it a big jump. And this idea of putting the money into a fund that will help invigorate British industry on technology is long overdue. Actually, the better we get at this, and the more we produce in this area, and the more we learn from Ukraine and bring their technology over here, the more we'll be able to export as well to our allies and friends, which will also be very good for us. And also, by the way, it will find a way of employing students, technical students coming out, being able to do computer science, all sorts of aerodynamics, engineering. They will all find a place to come and exercise their degree rather than having to go off into the City of London and push money around. So the reality is this would be good for us. It's also worth remembering, and people don't really know this, that during the Second World War, the United Kingdom outproduced Soviet Russia and Germany put together. Incredible.
We can do it.
Ships, planes. We had people designing some of the most brilliant designs for their day, like the Mosquito aircraft made of wood, but the fastest flying bomber that ever was. All of that sort of thing was done in the UK. We competed with America in that regard. I had a row, I'm afraid, with a MAGA person the other day when I was in the States, who said to me, we're going to have to bail you out again like we did before. And I said, excuse me,
Sod off.
we were fighting for 2.5 years before you got anywhere near it.
Also, I'm so fed up with this. You didn't come to bail us out. Hitler declared war on you.
Exactly right. And if we hadn't survived, by the way, you wouldn't have done either. Yeah. So I said, give me a break. Yeah. We did and paid our way, and we still paid for them.
Yeah, but again, by the way, what's linked to this, of course, with this issue, to cut all the net zero subsidies, and again, a lot of this is following on the tailcoats. I mean, I know people like you and Craig McKillian and others were being very sane, and Steve Baker about these things for a long time. But reform policies has dragged the Tories kicking and screaming to this. But there's also, you cannot have a strong economy. You cannot have a strong defence without a strong economy, and you can't have a strong economy without strong energy production and the ability to actually produce stuff with.
Yeah, we sit on an island of gas.
And then we're
on an island of gas.
Yeah.
We have gas underneath us, and we refused to tap it in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mad.
One final thing I want to ask you about, very briefly. The police are now saying, Met Police, Great Manchester Police, two of our biggest police forces, saying we are now understanding that globalise the intifada is a phrase that does have consequences, and we are now going to arrest people, protesters, and have actually arrested overnight some protesters who've been using that chant, which of course does mean, kill Jews worldwide. We know that's what it means. That's why people are chanting it. Do you welcome that change, but do you think it's come a little bit too late?
Oh, God, yes, of course I welcome the change. I mean, it's been pretty poor. We all believe in freedom of speech, but the freedom of speech has been abused now for some time, using the excuse of Gaza to go out there and abuse people who are British citizens living in these islands, and basically encouraging them to be attacked. Of course, it comes a lot from Iran as well. Yep. We still haven't got rid of the IRGC in the UK. They're still promoting all that. So yes, it's right the police should now start to crack down on these sort of marches. We don't need as many of them anymore, and for what they say during the marches and shout. Many of them don't even realise, honestly, what they're saying because they're given to them by others. Yep. But we need to say to them, if you shout this stuff, you will be punished. Because it means... I have a Jewish sister-in-law, I confess, and she has never felt, she told me, more threatened at any time than she can recall.
Yeah, well, we can see how it plays out, whether it's at a synagogue in Manchester or on a beach in Sydney. And again, my rule is always very simple. I think there are a lot of useful idiots, but there are, if you can't name the river and you can't name the sea, don't shout from the river to the sea. But we know that the people...
Jewish people have brought a phenomenal amount to the United Kingdom. Without them, goodness knows where it would be, in banking, in engineering, in science, and we should be celebrating them as British citizens, I have to tell you, every day.
Not allowing people to call for their death. It seems a pretty basic way of going about living in a civilised society, doesn't it? Sir Nicholas-Smith, always good to talk to you. Covered a lot of ground there. Former Conservative Party leader. 12:24 is the time. Philip Ingham, I just want to come back to you on the Defence Fund. Do you welcome this from Kemi Badenoch? Basically, stop all these net zero subsidies, get rid of a load of the nonsense government spending, which of course should have been done under the Tories too, and spend it on a Defence Fund.
I do very much, and there's. If people realise how much benefit comes out for civil society from investment in defence and all the rest of it, they'd be shocked. The internet was a defence tool. The LED light was developed by a British defence organisation owned by the government. They failed to register the design.
It's good skilled jobs, but also it's national defence.
It is national defence. Yeah, very much so. But the spin-off that there is for civil society is huge.
Strong, OK, thank you very much. Coming up to 12:25, going to take a quick break. Then we're going to get to your calls on lots of the different topics we are talking about. Then we're going to be talking about the latest, just woke madness, decolonising countries by sending our museum artefacts to be loaned to them, and also transphobic Christmas cards. I'm absolutely gutted I didn't get hold of this Christmas card myself. Anyway, this is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:28 is the time. Let's get to your calls. Coming in thick and fast on all the big topics we are talking about today. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have your say. Helen is on the line. She's in Suffolk. And Helen, you want to talk about this, basically this strategy to tackle violence against women and girls, and in particular, boys as young as 11 being taught, well, don't be a misogynist, don't be violent, and don't sexually abuse girls. But what do you make of it?
Well, I'd just like to say the problem extends much wider than just boys. My daughter's a deputy head teacher at a primary school, and this is normal language, abhorrent language that these young children are shouting at the teachers. I'm not actually allowed to say what an example of...
No, please don't get me in trouble.
No.
But the youngsters, boys and girls, being abusive to the teachers.
Yes,
and what is your daughter's the deputy head? So what is done when the kids do that? Because at my school, you'd be in detention for a heck of a long time.
Well, they would at my school, but these days this is a primary school. These are children who are 6.
What?
Yes, and I'm not allowed to say what they call the teachers. Am I allowed to say?
No, please don't. If my producer had said don't say, please don't say.
Right. Okay. Shocking.
But language you might expect, sort of, in the pub or at a building site, rather than.
Well, yes.
Words that children should never have actually heard. I'm going to say.
Exactly. So, teaching people to respect other people. If it's going to be taught at all, it's not just boys and misogyny. It should start at kind of nursery school.
Well, I'm thinking we need to start with the parents, because I'm sorry if my kid used language like that at 16, let alone at 6. I'd have something to say about it. Now, my language is completely blue. I'm a terrible old swearer off air. But I didn't swear in front of my daughter when she was young, so she wouldn't ever hear naughty words. And we don't talk abusively to each other at home. So she wouldn't have thought that was something that you could do to a teacher.
Exactly. Well, that's the reality.
Well, I dread to think what's happening in these kids' homes.
Well, I dread to think of it too, but that is the reality on a day-to-day basis.
That is very telling. Helen, thank you very much indeed. Oh, God, I mean, it's just awful, isn't it? Let me get to some of the texts and tweets coming in on that before we go to another call. But I'm asking your reaction, and Holly's message to say that's learned in the home by observing the father. It shouldn't be forced into schools by the government. Peter says how to respect women and girls should come from parents and no one else. Yeah, but what if at home there isn't a dad, and if women are talking down the men, or the women have been browbeaten by men, or they're in an abusive relationship? How are you going to learn that if schools aren't teaching it? Tom says it's nice to see girls being taught how to behave respectfully in turn, and I agree with you on that. Schoolboys aren't the problem, says Joe. The problem is coming here every day in boats. Scott says teach them maths and English, nothing else. Jamie says I've never heard such nonsense. The problem is social media. Maybe it's time we ban kids from having phones in school. It's not maybe, it's time. 100%. It should never have been allowed, and any head teacher who thinks that any child should have a phone in their school is completely wrong. I'm definitely coming round to the ban on social media for youngsters. I just want a ban that doesn't impact on privacy for adults. Henry says all that it's going to do is to make boys even more resentful and make the problem worse. How about just teaching everyone, says Jeff, to respect everyone? Now, that's the thing. Are we just going to make the problem worse? Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Telling boys yet again there's something wrong with them. Let's go to Mike, who's on the line in South Wales. And Mike, you want to talk about this Erasmus student scheme, don't you?
Yes, you do. Good morning. How are you?
Very well indeed.
Okay?
Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah. What gets me is, why are they saying that this Erasmus scheme is going to cost about £500 million, and that's exactly the same as what they're going to get in inheritance tax from the farmers, roughly. So why is it then that we are sending kids on holidays, and yet we're ruining farmers' livelihoods and some of them committing suicides?
Yeah, and the Prime Minister said at the liaison committee earlier this week, when he's asked by select committee chairs, are you aware that farmers are have committed suicide, are going to commit suicide because they're so worried about losing their farms. And, you know, and he said, yes, he was aware, but he's pushing forward with the policy.
And I've talked to people from this area, and they've gone to see their financial advisors last year, and their advice to them was, tell your parents to live another 4 years.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. By the way, I'd like to point out that farmers are now blocking roads in Brussels outside the EU summit with a huge number of tractors. So the other EU leaders are facing an awful lot of problems here, but that's about another issue. But yeah, I mean, this is the thing. This is the thing, I think the thing that frustrates a lot of people is that again and again, governments say, we haven't got any money, we're going to have to tax you more, we can't spend money on this, we'd love to. And then you find out they are spending money on ridiculously frivolous, unnecessary things. They always seem to find the money for those.
Well, as they've said, now that we can get sort of £8 million, as you were saying this morning, back from the previous episode of Erasmus.
Yeah.
Why are we starting it up again when we are getting taxed? The farmers are getting taxed.
Yep.
We need them to supply the food, and yet
Yep.
they're going back into the scheme again to waste more billions of pounds.
No, very good point, Mike.
Where's the sense in that?
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate that. 12:34. It's a fair point, isn't it, Philip Ingram?
Very fair. You know, socialism works until they run out of other people's money.
Yeah. Exactly. It's just crazy, isn't it? It's all these like pet schemes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Talking of pet schemes, oh my goodness, the wokedom in academia we know is terrible, in civil service, in schools, in the NHS, in government, you know, you name it, everywhere. No, never worse than anywhere than in our museums because, oh, you know, colonialism. We're going to be talking about how the British Museum is working to decolonise our former colonies. How? Well, we're going to find out from Connor Tomlinson up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, and we are the home of common sense, which is why we don't spend our time wringing our hands over Britain's terrible past and how awful we were to the rest of the world and how we should be apologising, paying reparations and, well, decolonising as much as we can. However, that makes us rather different from British Museum and pretty much many other museums around to the country who feel that, well, it's their job to try and, well, apologise and atone for Britain's past. This is why the British Museum is going to share artefacts from its collections, not send them back like the Elgin marbles and others, with former colonies to help them, they say, decolonise. Curators have overseen the transfer of prized Greek and Egyptian treasures to a leading Indian museum. The 80 artefacts are now displayed in a new gallery intended to, they literally say this, to undo colonial misinterpretation by highlighting India's contributions to civilization. It would be a new model, we're told by the British Museum director, for working with countries seeking redress for colonialism. I mean, when they finish self-flagellating and whipping themselves, for goodness sake, maybe they should listen to my next guest, writer at Courage Media, Connor Tomlinson. A very good afternoon to you, Connor.
Good afternoon, Julia. It's like you bring me on anytime some liberal decides to shout from their ivory tower how much white guilt they have.
I know. It's very, very tragic, isn't it? So we're awful. We're terrible. Britain was awful. We're responsible for every bad and ill in the world. And the answer to that is send some artefacts to a foreign museum. Is that really? Talk me through this.
Well, the Getty Trust, which is a private charity funded off the back of an American oil baron, is spending the equivalent of £5 billion to do this. Now, it's very much an exercise in sort of Mrs. Jellyby style telescopic philanthropy, because imagine how much good that money could have done in both the UK and America. Yeah. But by the by, to undo colonialism, which in my estimation at this point just means leaving certain countries tidier than we found them, it turns out that the British Museum, not content with losing 2,000 artefacts under the previous was it not administrator, I forget the word, a guy that runs the collection, and they've only recovered about 600 of those. They're now shipping away 80, as you said, Greek and Egyptian artifacts to India. So they are now selling off the priceless treasures of other civilizations to another civilization that had no interaction with them, because they're not Indian artifacts.
This is the bit I found a bit confusing. It's a general, foreigners, we were horrid to all of them, let's pay reparations. It's kind of, but they're being loaned though, aren't they? They're not being sent permanently.
Yeah, there's 3-year loans, but this is, they can't be sent permanently because
they're not allowed to under the rules of the British Museum's trustees.
Yeah, well, there was an act passed in 1963 that says the museum basically can't ship its artifacts overseas because
they can do this. The loans is how they get around it. But this is the thing. Okay, this is all based, as you say, on this idea that what we did in the past was wrong. Now, every single empire, from time immemorial, has done some bad things. A lot of taking of slaves, ransacking countries, stealing their people, stealing their artifacts, whether it's their gold in South America or their oil or whatever it is. This has happened time immemorial. For some reason, there are a lot of people in this country and in America who are convinced that the British Empire was uniquely wrong. No evidence for this whatsoever. But look, bad things were done to people in our colonies. There's no doubt at all. Some of the things that were done were bad, and people did lose out, and countries were exploited. But that was the norm at those times. I don't know why we are uniquely somehow wrong or guilty, or indeed that any of us living now should in any way feel bad about what happened before we were even born, or even our grandparents were born.
I think you're far more conciliatory than I am, Julia, because at this point, I'm just seeing this as an exercise in not just relitigating historical grievances, but one-sided ethnic chauvinism. Because why would you want...
right.
Yeah, why would you want to seize the artifacts of a civilization that has nothing to do with you, other than to gloat, to say, well, we now have the priceless treasures of the world rather than those Brits. Yeah. So I'm actually less interested in admitting various and nebulous faults. Yeah, sure, bad things were done, etc., etc. I think we're actually the heroes of history, not just for vanquishing the slave trade, but putting down the practice of widow burning that was conducted by Hindus in the 19th century, trying to stop women throw their children beneath the wheels of the juggernaut once a year to have another go on the reincarnation merry-go-round. All of these atrocities were perpetrated, and still are perpetrated in large numbers, by the way, in our former imperial provinces. There's still large amounts of child marriage happening in India, still large amounts of cousin marriage, still there's a lot of rape happening, and it happens when Indians come to the UK as well, so it's a culturally endemic practice.
And Pakistanis as well. We know the grooming gangs largely from one particular area in Pakistan.
Exactly, and so a little bit of gratitude actually wouldn't go amiss from the Indian subcontinent, considering we gave them English, a functioning governance structure, the legacy of common law, architecture, and the railways. And so it's actually not the fault of Britain, apparently, according to 2 Marxist economists from India, extracting something like 50 trillion from, I don't know, we just dug cash out of the dirt, apparently, in Mumbai. No, we gave you a lot of wealth, we gave you a functioning government, and we gave you a culture that your own culture couldn't produce. And I'm sorry if you screwed it up, you now don't get to whine about it.
But this is the thing. There is an element where, again, you can see the good and the bad in history. But the idea that we were uniquely bad, honestly, if you're going to argue in history, we have a much better track record than most. And by the way, looking at countries that are from Europe that did actually colonise, you were lucky if you were colonised by Britain rather than, say, the Portuguese or the Belgians, to be honest with you, if you look at their track records of their countries. But this is the key thing, isn't it? It's this idea also, life was brutal for pretty much everybody. The idea that, your average Brit in these colonial days was living this life of Riley as opposed to working a 6-day week, 12-hour day, down the factory or a 7-day week in the fields. I mean, living hand to mouth is an absolute nonsense. We weren't all, aristocrats of, the Jane Austen, sort of fiction. But in terms of this, you mentioned this is, there is a race aspect to this, isn't it? It's because there does seem to be white liberal guilt about things that white people in the past have done, and at the same time making out that everybody else is a victim. And it's not only sort of racist against whites, and again this white privilege nonsense, it's also racist against people of of India or Egypt or wherever, because or Africa, seeing them as perpetual victims. I mean, it's a genuinely very, very unhealthy viewpoint to take.
It is, but I don't think they actually see it as patronising. So I think we start from two very different places. I think that the white liberals start from the premise that if it weren't for the sins of racism and colonialism and injustice, we'd all be living in John Lennon's Imagine. Yes. So they think that we should flagellate ourselves and procedurally discriminate against our own people and send reparations and priceless cultural artefacts overseas to atone for their guilt, and then everyone will be equal. Instead, I don't think places like India or Africa see this as us talking down to them. I think they see this as us being weak and them being able to gain relative advantage. Because remember, these cultures aren't universalist, they aren't as honest, they are ethnically and tribally nepotistic. And this is why I've spoken to friends in the American government, in Australian politics, and of course even people like Kemi Badenoch have said this during her time as trade minister. This is why whenever you try and deal with some country like India, when you push a trade item over the table, when you try to give them a fair hearing about their historical grievances, they always tack on more advantages to themselves. They always add, more visas for Indian workers.
Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? They're acting on behalf of their own people.
Exactly. And it's only our sort of self-effacing, suicidal white guilt, our inability to take our own side, that allows them to take the piss, basically.
Okay.
So,
apologies for that language.
Apologies, total apologies.
But they are taking it. Let's go taking the mick. Oh, God, that's probably on PC
yes,
too.
Yeah,
I'm half Irish, I'm allowed to say it. But again, this is the thing. But actually, you say, people often say it's ours. It's not ours. The vast majority of the British people don't sign up to this. Of every, by the way, every skin colour. It is only sort of, it really is. There's race baiters and there are white liberal guilt-ridden souls, and they don't represent the vast majority of this country. Connor Tomlinson, always good to talk to you. He's from Courage Media. Philip Ingram, listening to all of that. I mean, look, you travelled around the world. You worked around the world in your former role in the military. It is extraordinary how many sort of just hand-wringing liberals is permanently sort of apologising for Britain's past. I'm so proud of Britain's past. Yeah. Not everything's perfect. Of course it isn't. No one's perfect. Our past in the last 20 years isn't perfect. But the hand-wringing guilt and the sort of the self-flagellation, it's embarrassing.
Yeah, there's a lot we got wrong in the past. There's an awful lot more we got right in the past.
Yep.
And every country's the same. And you get some countries and some groups are permanent victims, and they just want to play that out. We shouldn't apologise for the past. We should learn from what's happened in the past and make sure that those bad things never happen again.
Yeah.
But we don't need to be apologising for it.
Exactly.
It's not affecting current society.
It's so tragic. But you just imagine how many approving looks he'll get at North London dinner parties, this British Museum boss, for doing this. 12:46 is the time. Up next, going to talk about another woke bit of madness, and that is the battles at Hampstead Heath Ponds. I kid you not, the women's pond. And we're also going to be talking about a transphobic Christmas card on sale at Sainsbury's. It's been withdrawn because apparently it is transphobic. I'm just gutted it's been withdrawn before I could buy them all up. We're going to talk about that with Sex Matters. Fiona McInerney up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. It's 12:50. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. Just some news for you this morning, which I think we talked a lot the other week about the government's plan to basically postpone local elections, already postponed by a year earlier this year in Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Hampshire and West Sussex until 2026, affecting up to 5 million people. A lot of these seats, including the mayoralties, basically they were going to go reform. And what a surprise that the Labour government decided they would be delayed because they couldn't just reorganise their unitary authorities in time. Now it's emerged that the government is also now likely to ask Tory-controlled county councils, also facing losing their seats and the control to reform, looking at the current polls, if they want to suspend elections in their area as part of their plans to reorganise local government for another year, so delaying them again for millions of voters to 2027. Likely to promote something of a backlash from Nigel Farage and reform. I mean, I'm sorry, this is just an absolute outrage. If Donald Trump did this, they'd all be up in arms. But anyway, I'm sure that's going to get a lot of coverage over the next couple of days. Right now, let's talk about the latest trans madness that keeps afflicting us and all women. Let's talk to Fiona McInerney, who's Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters. Very good afternoon to you, Fiona.
Hello there, Julia.
Hello. You're my last guest of 2025, and it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you because you're one of the first people to bring me to the story of trans when you were campaigning against getting men out of women's sport. And you are, well, we're not quite there yet, but you were doing your best. But you've been an absolute heroine to me from all of this. But latest is about, the pools. There's, ponds. Hampstead Heath, they've got rules for their various ponds because they have a women's pond. Guess who that's for? A men's pond. And they also have a mixed pond, which anyone can go to. But as we've seen forever, trans-identified men who are claiming or pretending to be women have been using the women's pond. And there's an ongoing legal case about this. Where are we at with that?
Yeah, so we, Sex Matters, have brought that case against the City Corporation of London, who run the ponds, on the basis that if you've got a mixed pond, a men's pond and a ladies' pond, then that's who they're for. No one is excluded. There's a place for everyone. And we had our day in court yesterday asking for permission for our full legal challenge to be heard, but we won't get an answer, even on whether the case will be heard, until January.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and in the meantime, there are basically 3 places where men can go on Hampstead Heath.
Well, I can say where they can go right now, those men, but I don't think I'm allowed to say on air. I mean, how complicated it is we had the Supreme Court ruling in April. That was supposed to have made it really, really clear. It didn't change the law. It said, no, the law is and has always been under the Equality Act that when you define what a woman is, it's based on biological sex and not as, absolutely bizarre ruling last week in the Sadie Peggy case where the nurse who was forced to get changed in front of a male doctor watching her while she changed her underwear at work, for goodness sake, who claimed that he was trans, Dr. Beth Upton, that it was, it was basically defined by whether you put on a dress and grew your hair or what you were assigned at birth. I mean, I thought the Supreme Court judgment was going to make it really clear. So things like this Hampstead Pond thing would be really clear. If you've got a willy, you're not allowed at the women's pond.
Well, I think we all thought it was pretty clear. Certainly the Supreme Court wrote a very clear judgment. But after that judgment, the City of London Corporation reviewed their policy and changed the sign at the women's pond. And it now says it's for anyone who identifies as a woman. Yeah, which they say, the sign says, means people who were female at birth and also trans women with the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, which is a huge mouthful, but it's simply a way of saying any man who turns up and says, I'm a lady, can go in, and who can stop them? So that's why we've gone to court.
Quite right. I mean, again, I'm of the view that all the people involved are insane, because I don't know why people want to swim in a freezing cold pond on Hampstead Heath, but that's up to them. But this is the thing. It's not like they're being excluded from swimming in a Hampstead pond, these men who have claimed that they are women. They have a pond to swim. They have 2 ponds they can swim in, the men's pond, or if they want to believe that they are trans, that's up to them. Live your best life. They can go to the mixed pond where there will be both men and women. But no, they have to go to the women's pond. And this is what keeps on happening, isn't it? This demand to enter women's spaces.
Yes, and that's why this matters. You know, the women's pond, the ladies' pond at Hampstead is quite secluded, it's quite small, it's special for the people who go there. There's a much bigger men's pond with the diving board and a much bigger mixed pond. Like you, Julia, I have no interest in being in that freezing water, but the women who do, who use that pond, want the privacy to do it out of the male gaze, and that's what that's provided for 100 years until the City of London Corporation decided 7 years ago that, you know, the world has changed and now men can be women.
But I mean, we've had this with British sport as well. I mean, thank God, you know, Donald Trump being absolutely clear and making it very clear to the Olympic Committee, you know, if you trans athletes wanted to compete in women's sports, ain't going to be given a visa. So you sort that out, and it's clearly that's on the way. But it seems like we're having to sort of litigate every single sport, litigate every single school, every single, you know, every single office, every charity, every organisation, every event. The Supreme Court ruling was very clear. Well, the law was always clear in my view. Everyone decided to suddenly stop understanding words. Let's all pretend we don't know what a woman is. Everyone knows what a sodding woman is, and babies know from birth what a woman is and what a man is. They're able to spot this just as clearly as our Prime Minister could have all these years. And yet it does seem to me that people were cheering on that day. And I remember saying on air, this is a great turning point, but, you know, woke ain't dead. And I think we're going to have to battle this. Are we looking at literally a legal case in every single circumstance to force these organisations to see sense?
Well, I spoke to you that day, Julia. I remember coming out of court and speaking to you and thinking, here we go. Now it's just about making it stick. And it's been shocking how resistant people are to saying no to men when it's women who have to pay the price. There will be more court cases. We've chosen the Ponds case because it's a local authority, and if we can get a win on that, then it sets a precedent.
That's
at the
very
High
interesting.
Court.
Can I just ask, will it just finally also, will it set a precedent in terms of whether or not trans activists are going to get a sense of humour? Because a Christmas card has been removed from Sainsbury's shelves after being branded transphobic. It's got Dr. Seuss's Grinch character alongside the caption, "This Christmas I'm identifying as a Grinch." Apparently this is an anti-trans dog whistle. What do you make of that?
I think it's a fun card. I think that if you can't poke fun at something, that tells you a lot. Is it fragile? I mean, you can call me anything you like. I still know the reality for me. So if people have to be protected from offensive Christmas cards, then they really have lost their sense of Christmas, of humour. And also their identity is somewhat fragile, isn't it?
I have to say, I mean, again, it's extraordinary. I'm just gutted I didn't get a chance to buy them all. I'd seen that card. I would absolutely have bought it, bought up the entire stock for the country. Fiona McInerney, you've been doing great work this year. I hope you carry on. I'm sorry you still have to carry on in the new year, but I fear you will. Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters. Thank you so much for it. That's my final guest of the year. Philip Ingram, still dressed as a Christmas. He is identifying as a Christmas tree today. Philip Ingram, what do you make of all that?
Well, bar humbug. You know, I identify as a grump. I think when it comes to dealing with this, it's quite clear. Men are men, women are women. There's no crossover.
It's just not. And again, we can be kind, we can be nice. Yes. I mean, again, but like, let's just
you
not.
You can identify for what you want, and it's brilliant, that you do, but don't be intolerant about it.
No, it's
and don't
just,
force it on other people.
Don't force, especially other women. Especially when we talk. It's fascinating that Jess Phillips, who's really woke, you know, violence against women and girls. Yeah, a lot of women and girls don't want a man to be in their toilet or their changing room because they fear violence. Joining us right now tonight to say is Kevin O'Sullivan, standing in for Ian Collins. I never get to see you otherwise unless you're doing breakfast on your
Lovely to see you.
Hello,
we're like ships that never pass in the night, sort of thing. By the way, that Christmas card, it was the Christmas card company that junked every single one of